Chapter 11:12. Creak ya. As the door of the washroom slowly opened, a gust of cold air drifted out at this time. At the same time, a withered hand with finger bones that looked like branches suddenly reached out and grabbed the door. Miss May took a step back and looked down at him. The hand moved the door panel inwards little by little. In the dim light, a face that was almost buried under the cheek was slowly rising with white hair. Miss May could even clearly see the desperate look on the face. "Oh, Miss Nero, are you all right?" Miss May asked softly. You try for 20 days, only drink waters. It's my fault." Miss May was sincerely apologetic at this moment. "I'm really sorry. Please wait for a while. I'll prepare some food for you to recover your body right away." Miss May finished and left in a hurry, as if she was eager to make up for her mistake. Seeing this, Nero had to crawl out of the washroom bit by bit. Ordinary people could only drink water to maintain their hunger for 7 or 8 days, and they would have died long ago. She could hold on for so long because of her well-tempered body. But even so, during this period, the pain Nero had to endure every day increased exponentially. The pain in her body had to be suppressed regularly with medicine. Without medicine, he could only endure it. This was already a huge burden on the body. Furthermore, it was true that this body had been tempered thousands of times. But the more a body was tempered like this, the more it would consume a shocking amount of energy. In the hall, Taisetsu put Tienzi, who was in a daze, on the ground. Since he was picked up by himself, Tienzi had been like this all the time. At this time, he seemed to have accepted his fate. He leaned against the foot of the tea table and stared blankly at the old gramophone in the corner. "Taisetsu, well, yes." Taisetsu nodded. He sat forward and asked, "Bro, what's the matter?" Tienzi raised his paw and pointed to the old gramophone in the corner. "Inside the cabinet. Count from the left. Take out the 9th disc. It's heavy, and the extra one is specially hidden by me. Can you help me take it out and play it?" It should be no problem." Taisetsu thought for a while. Neither the boss nor the servant girl seemed to have warned him not to touch the things here. Of course, Taisetsu didn't have the habit of touching things here. He thought it should not be a big problem to play a song with the gramophone. So he agreed readily and asked curiously, "By the way, bro, why do you suddenly want to listen to songs?" Tienzi looked at Taisetsu helplessly and said in a low of vicissitudes of life, "I was a decent man when I was alive. It's not too much to ask for something I like before I die. Of death. The last meal of a condemned prisoner can be more sumptuous." "Bro, what have you done?" Taisetsu shook his head. But he was the kind of person who would do what he promised, so he still walked toward the gramophone. Tienzi sighed at this time, looking at Taisetsu squatting down to look for the record. "To tell you the truth, I was a decent man before. I was in charge of a big project of the club." "Is it this one?" Taisetsu took out a vinyl disc according to Tienzi's words, and took out a record from the cover. "But there's only one? Didn't you say there was a folded one in there?" Tienzi was startled, as if he wanted to say something, but in the end he just sighed and looked at Taisetsu. "My birthday is on the 17th day of the 4th lunar month. My favorite food is the osmanthus cake from Baifengjai in Luoyang, but now it's hard to find, so the osmanthus cake from the supermarket will do. Also, I don't know if there's such a thing in the basement, but it's best to burn a few boxes. By the way, remember to burn a copy of The Straw Hat King when it's finished. But if the author says there's a new challenge waiting for him after the end or something like that, then you don't have to burn it, just burn the author." Listening to Tienzi talking about things to take note of, Taisetsu became more and more curious about what this dignified Black Soul envoy before him had done. Was it referring to what happened in the Penglai treasure vault? At this time, some strange sounds came from the corridor. Tienzi was still talking endlessly, as if he had entered a deserted land, and did not care at all. Taisetsu looked curiously and saw a mummified woman wrapped in a bath towel crawling out of the corridor little by little. Taisetsu vaguely remembered that this seemed to be the one who was locked in the bathroom before leaving. Taisetsu looked at the current Nero, and then looked at the current appearance of Tienzi. At the same time, the image of Wang who covered in feces flashed through his mind, and he suddenly shuddered. He heard footsteps coming from the direction of the kitchen. Almost without thinking, as if by instinct, Taisetsu stuffed the record into the envelope at the fastest speed, then quickly walked back to the sofa and sat upright. A strong desire to survive even drove Taisetsu to show a stiff smile. "Yee, Mississippi, are you done?" The maid opened the curtain and walked out at this time with a tray in her hand. She looked at Taisetsu, sitting upright at this time, and felt a little strange. "Mr. Taisetsu, are you very hot?" "Hot? No. Oh, maybe I just finished exercising? Didn't I just have a fight in the Punglai treasure vault?" Taisetsu subconsciously wiped his forehead. "What did I sweat? There's ice water on the counter, fresh." The maid smiled slightly. "You will be fine after rest." Taisetsu nodded stiffly. Later, the maid walked to Nero as if she didn't see Tienzi and slowly put down a plate of food on the tray. "Mississippi Nero, this is the food I made for you carefully. It can supplement the nutrition you lack. So, please enjoy it. A pot of hot and explosive mixture." The maid left with the tray and walked toward the study. Taisetsu glanced at the back of the maid who had left and then looked at the food in front of Nero. Nero was still weak and shriveled on the ground, and the food was placed in front of her on the floor. He suddenly felt the malice from the maid, but at this time, Nero stuck out her tongue little by little toward the food on the plate. Taisetsu widened his eyes, opened his mouth, and felt that his breathing seemed to be rapid. "Don't eat it! Don't eat it! I will lose my dignity if I eat it. Hold on." Finally, Nero licked the food on the plate and lost her dignity. "Knock, knock." There was a knock on the door. When Yi walked into the study, Luochio was squatting on the sofa in the corner, combing the hair on Luoya's face with gentle eyes. Luoya was lying on the sofa at this time, and seemed to have fallen asleep. "Master." Luochio turned back and made a gesture of whispering. The maid nodded, softly put down the tray and tea silently, and then came to Luochio's side. "She must be very tired." The maid looked at the little girl's delicate face at this time. "Wait a minute, I will clean up a room." Luochio nodded, and then took off his coat. Seeing this, Miss Maid walked to the back and helped to take off the coat. Then, she covered Luoya with the coat. "You can always guess what I want to do." The maid looked back and smiled faintly. Luochio waved his hand at Luoya. The air shook, and the entire sofa was covered by an invisible cover. Luochio then returned to the desk and sat down. "By the way, was Miss Nero?" "Nothing serious." The maid looked natural. Luochio just nodded and didn't ask. He looked up at Yu Yi and suddenly said, "Califar." Beside the desk, the maid who was pouring flower tea for Luochio suddenly stopped. At the same time, the steaming tea was about to overflow. It was not because the maid was absent-minded, but because she was still at this moment. Sure enough, Luochio's fingers suddenly tapped on the table, and the falling tea also stopped. Luochio closed his eyes at this time. In the club, everything seemed to become black and white. Taisetsu, who was sitting upright, also stopped. Nero, who was burying her face in the food, also didn't move. Tienzi still lowered his head and didn't move. Luochio sighed softly, stood up, and walked out of the study alone. Soon after, he came to the lowest floor of the club and opened the door that only he could enter. Everything here was the same as the last time he left. Luochio walked to the altar. At this time, the altar began to rise slowly, and the pillar inlaid with gold and silver cards gradually appeared. Luochio walked around the pillar twice. He suddenly stopped. "This is actually not good, if there is no one who can talk to me." It was dead silent here. Only Luochio's voice sounded. "Accept freedom." Luochio looked at the altar in front of him and said expressionlessly, "I could do anything I like, right?" The pillar on the altar slowly descended. Luochio looked at it, took 2 steps back, then turned around and walked out of the room where the altar was and returned to the study again. The moment he sat down, everything returned to normal. The flower tea was still steaming, and the fragrance that could make people feel peaceful spread out. Luochio looked at Yuye's side face at this time. Finally, Yuye's wrist moved, and the teapot was set straight. A cup of flower tea that was 80% full was completed. I picked some fresh ones before I went out. "Master, please have a taste." She took the teacup and walked to Luochio's side. She bent over and put down the teacup without any change on her face. Luaccio couldn't help but reach out his hand and touched Yuye's cheek. Miss Maid was stunned. Master, Miss Chambermaid turned round on this occasion. Luaccio was now in the embrace of Miss Maid, like a child who wanted to ask for something. He put his ear on Miss Maid's body, as if he wanted to listen to something. She didn't say anything, just closed her eyes and gently held her master's head with her hands. They hug each other like this. After a long time, Luaccio took a deep breath, letting go of Yuyi, and said apologetically, I seem to have forgotten myself. Master, what happened to you that made you unhappy? Yuyi shook her head. Her tolerance was completely above her etiquette, but she was tolerant to her master in front of her. Luaccio seemed to return to normal. He looked at Yuyi, and his eyes were different from before. I just suddenly wanted to hug you, and thought that you wouldn't refuse me. Now it seems that I wasn't refused. Miss May just took Luaccio's hand and put it in front of her chest and said softly, Yuyi only belongs to you. As long as I'm still the boss of this shop? Luaccio suddenly asked. But Miss Maid said, please take me away. One day, before the seed of love that was gushing out of my heart at this moment disappeared completely, I could really fall in love with you. Stay with me for a while. The pendulum clock on the wall swayed, and the ticking sound filled every place in the lobby. When Yuyi left, she took Loyal with her to decorate a new room for her. Luaccio walked out of the study room. Nero had eaten all the food on the plate, and even licked it quickly. Now she was leaning against the counter, looking at the ceiling blankly, but her breath was better. Taisetsu saw the boss come out, and he was about to greet him, but Luaccio waved his hand to stop Taisetsu. He came to Nero's side. Although she ate the food on the plate very cleanly, and there was no food residue on her face, there were still some grease stains left. I'm really sorry. Along with Luoccio's voice, Nero's body was also recovering at an incredible speed. She returned to her previous state, no more, no less. Her injuries were still there. Luaccio took out a handkerchief and personally wiped the grease on Nero's face. In the next transaction, I will give Miss Nero a suitable discount. I'm sorry, I can only give such compensation. Nero's eyelashes moved at this moment. After recovering, she looked at Luaccio and suddenly said, Boss, you are so good to me. Aren't you afraid that your servant girl will quietly erase me from all senses? Miss Nero, you must be joking. Luaccio smiled and said, How can we do anything to hurt the customer? Even if we inadvertently cause losses, we will compensate immediately. Nero smiled. She reached out to Luaccio's ear and whispered, In order to survive, I can do anything. This is your personal freedom, Miss Nero. That's good. Nero narrowed her eyes at this time. I still feel unsafe, so from now on, I want to sell myself. I will sell myself, and then I will become your person. You can't refuse, right? The customer's request. Also, you said to give me a discount. Tianzi on the side suddenly moved at this time, looking at Nero pitifully. Does this silly girl think it's okay? Chapter 11:13. From a personal point of view, Luaccio didn't approve of Nero becoming a member of the club, because Nero had his spiritual seed in her body. If possible, Luaccio didn't want to lose Nero's vision just like that. However, based on the club's most basic transaction principle, since the customer made a request, the transaction would be triggered under the premise that the price could be paid. It would be involved in endless transactions, whether the customer was willing or not. But the power had reached that level, and it would never change. This might be a part of the lost freedom, a feeling of helplessness. Luaccio knew that step might come soon or late, but it would inevitably come. Most likely, he would become like the previous one and lose interest in everything. Just like the club's motto, you need to pay for what you get. He would become the agent of the eternal and indestructible origin in the endless time and space, and also a puppet under the will of the origin. It was also equivalent, right? Nero's request was approved by the altar. In fact, every transaction would be approved by the altar, and the most important transaction contract would appear. The power of the contract came from the altar, and Luaccio was just a witness and executor. Nero's biggest wish was to live. In the club, the customer's most basic thoughts would always be magnified. Perhaps your spirit is strong enough, you're strong enough, and you can resist, but you'll be stimulated in the end because you have been here for a long time, because you have made enough transactions, because you have walked on a path of no return from the very beginning. She seemed to only want to live, no matter what kind of way. But the request to live could be very big. It could live until the end of time, or even eternity. Obviously, the price of eternity was so great that it was almost immeasurable. But there seemed to be a shortcut. For example, the way to become a black soul envoy. Perhaps this was Nero's idea at this time. You will lose your freedom, your body, and you will no longer belong to you from now on. Your life and death will only depend on a single thought from now on, and you can't betray my will. Moreover, in the process of carrying out the task, you may encounter a terrible situation that may lead to death. Even so, are you willing to do it? This was a transaction, different from the transformation of Taisetsu. Taisetsu first became the club's property, and then was transformed by Luochio. He had no right to choose. At this time, both Taisetsu and Teienzi silently watched Nero, because Nero was likely to become their kind in a few minutes. Boss, is it really good to do business like this? Nero looked at Luochio's eyes at this time. Aren't you afraid that the customer is unwilling? Luochio smiled and said, if we make it clear, there won't be too many arguments in the future. And the choice has always been in the hands of the customer. Nero said indifferently, but the more beautiful thing is always on your side, isn't it? Although there is the so-called choice, where can there be a better choice than this? Looking at the parchment slowly floating in front of her, Nero easily pressed her palm on it. She whispered, I don't want to hurt like this anymore. The transformation process was very simple. Under the power of the club, the transformation process was even less than 10 seconds. Nero gave up her human body and obtained a body composed of the source of the foreign body. The scars on her body disappeared at this moment. She looked at her brand new body and felt the relaxed feeling that she had never felt before. Even without the use of drugs, it didn't hurt anymore. It doesn't hurt anymore. It hurts so much that it flies away. The voices of her childhood parents suddenly flashed in Nero's mind. It really doesn't hurt anymore. Nero looked at Luochio and smiled. Luochio saw a drop of tears slowly flowing from her eyes. This was the first time that Luochio saw Nero smile. It was not cruel, indifferent, ferocious, frivolous, malicious, and evil. It was just a very ordinary smile. It was so ordinary. It was a new black soul envoy. Miss Maid was not too surprised. She didn't even show any unpleasant expression because it was Nero. In the past hundreds of years, Miss Maid had witnessed many outstanding people become black soul envoys and watched them die in various difficult tasks again and again. She had long been used to it. Miss Maid's mood even seemed very good. When Boss Luo finished transforming Nero and returned to the study room again, Teienzi was surprised to find that he might not die. Black Soul envoys were managed by Miss Maid. At this time, Miss Maid was carefully explaining the work of Black Soul envoys to Nero. First, you're not allowed to use coercive means to force guests to trade, but you are allowed to use the means of inducing. Nero shrugged indifferently. Second, we don't have any real enemies. Every guest who comes here, even if he used to be hated by you, must maintain the most basic respect for customers. Nero still shrugged indifferently, indicating that she knew. Third, the master is everything to us. We are not allowed to have any thoughts of betraying the master. Especially, we can't be dissolute. We had to put on clothes immediately after bathing. Nero opened her mouth, but didn't say anything in the end. The education was still going on, but it seemed that it would take some time. Crouching Dragon Villa's underground medical room. Momo came to visit Jean Eyre almost every day. At this time, there were only 2 logistics staff and 1 medical staff left in Crouching Dragon Villa. Jean Eyre's current condition couldn't be transferred. Fortunately, Crouching Dragon Villa was built with great care and self-sufficient power could be maintained all the time. As for the thick fog, it was blocked outside by the enchantment released by the administration. Therefore, the medical equipment here could be used. Perhaps if this enchantment could be moved, it wouldn't stay here, but be used to move in the thick fog. Perhaps because it was too born to stay here, the nurse, who was ordered to stay, began to clean up. For example, she planned to wash Jean Eyre's clothes. There were still bloodstains on the clothes, which were taken off during the treatment. Then she put it in a corner and ignored it. When she picked it up, something suddenly fell out of the clothes. It was a small bell. This bell. The sound of the bell falling to the ground attracted Momo's attention. He walked to the nurse and picked up the bell on the ground, shaking it twice subconsciously. The crisp sound seemed to carry a kind of strange magic which could calm people down. "Mr. Momo, is it broken?" The nurse looked at Momo anxiously. Of course, she knew what kind of people lived in Crouching Dragon Villa. This ordinary-looking bell could be a magic tool or something similar to those Taoists who could fly in the sky and burrow into the ground. If it was damaged, she could not afford to compensate. "No, it's okay." Momo smiled. "Go do your work." The nurse left with a worried look. Momo looked at Jean Eyre's sleeping appearance through the glass, feeling helpless. "So you've been carrying this thing all the time?" Momo got it from Lai Kai-sheng, the successor of the cloth sect. On the first day, he lived in Crouching Dragon Villa, or it was given by Lai Kai-sheng. Momo didn't expect Jean Eyre to carry this bell all the time. Momo shook his head, holding the bell in his hand and walking out of the infirmary. There was a logistician here, so there was someone watching over the place. Thanks to the enchantment, the interior of Crouching Dragon Villa wasn't covered by the thick fog. But looking from the courtyard, Crouching Dragon Villa looked like a small world isolated in the thick fog. The fog was so thick that the villa looked dark. If one didn't look at the time, he couldn't even tell whether it was morning or afternoon. But Momo didn't expect that he would meet the mysterious man with the bronze mask who was causing a huge commotion outside at this time. It was in the courtyard of the cloth sect. Momo didn't even know when the man came and how he passed through the enchantment. At this moment, the man with the bronze mask was standing in the courtyard, looking up at a parasol tree in the courtyard. Momo was greatly frightened. There were only 2 logisticians left in the villa, but they couldn't be counted on. He was the only one left. The only thing that gave Momo some confidence was that he got back his luggage, magic tools and talismans from Dragon Tiger Mountain, so he wouldn't have to resort to close combat. He held a powerful talisman in his hand, walking into the courtyard. Momo had a feeling that the man with the bronze mask came for him. Heavenheart 71 generation. How dare you break into Crouching Dragon Villa? Momo rushed into the courtyard, pointing the nameless black wooden sword at him, shouting angrily, "What the hell do you want? Is your partner okay?" The man with the bronze mask turned around, looking at Momo, saying indifferently, "I heard he survived, right?" Momo clenched his teeth. "It's all because of you, that, John. Damn it." As the saying goes, those who survive a great disaster are bound to have good fortune later. The man with the bronze mask said, "He's like that, and so are you. This proves that you have a strong destiny, but that doesn't mean you can squander it without restraint. You might be able to see a new world, so why don't you cherish it?" "Cherish it?" Momo sneered. If they hadn't been rescued that day, then so many seniors of the Tao world and experts of the Demon Clan would have been sacrificed. Do you want to sacrifice so many people's lives for your own selfish desire? Who are you to judge whether they'll survive or not? Who are you to judge whether they should stay or not? Those who achieve great things must have sacrifices. The man with the bronze mask said indifferently, "In ancient times, weak tribes would abandon their old and weak clansmen in order to maintain their vitality, leaving more food for their descendants. It's the same principle. They've exhausted their potential in the long years. Even if the spirit chi recovers, they won't be able to break through their current state. Therefore, they put their hopes on those with potential and were willing to sacrifice themselves. In your opinion, it's only for their own selfish reasons. They did it willingly?" Momo opened his mouth in surprise. "You don't know." The man with the bronze mask said, "The pain of not being able to progress further, the despair of dying at the end of one's lifespan. You haven't seen the scene where the road is still there, but it's completely blocked. Cultivating for 100 years in vain. Cultivating hard for a few decades until their potential is exhausted and they're on the verge of despair. Yet, the days passed by mercilessly. Do you know all these? Accompanied by the voice of the man with the bronze mask, many scenes appeared in front of Momo. Cultivators who chose to end their own lives in despair, demons who roared to the sky in grief and indignation. Hatred, hatred, hatred. Kill, kill, kill. Momo didn't know how long it was, but he only felt cold sweat. That endless resentment and pain seemed to penetrate into the depths of his soul. The black wooden sword fell to the ground as he couldn't hold it firmly. Momo knelt on the ground weakly. He knelt in the endless unwillingness, anger, and despair. Those were the people and demons who had lost their lives in despair after their immortal paths were blocked. Until the sound of the bell suddenly rang, breaking this resentment like a bolt of lightning. Momo's mind was pulled out of the horror. He gasped for breath and looked at the man with the bronze mask in front of him. He didn't know when the man had that bell in his hand. Whether it's the Tao world or the demon world, it seems peaceful. The man with the bronze mask said slowly, "But how many undercurrents are surging? You may not realize it. It's accumulating. This despair has been accumulating, and this depression is increasing day by day. When that day comes, it can't bear it anymore. When it can't suppress it anymore, madness will follow. Perhaps it will really go to the extreme." Do you know why the administration was set up after XIN was established? Momo shook his head blankly. Because it's even crazier. The man with the bronze mask said indifferently. Taoists secretly used the lives of mortals to break the shackles. The demon clan has become crazier. They became more secretive, and their means became crazier and more extreme. If they couldn't absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, they would absorb the essence of mortals. The tranquility and inaction of the Taoists had long disappeared, and they had more or less turned into the demon clan, becoming the devil that devours humans. It was like a plague, quietly spreading to the Taoist and demon world. We only have two destinies, to die in madness or to find a new breakthrough. If we don't find a breakthrough, we will only die crazily, and it will even engulf the entire mortal world. How could it be? You should feel lucky. The man with the bronze mask walked to Momo. You should feel lucky that they finally chose to sacrifice instead of going crazy. You should feel lucky that they are still willing to open a way for you to survive, leaving hope to you. Momo raised his head, looking at him. He slowly took off the bronze mask on his face. Now, do you still think we did it for our own selfish interests? Momo widened his eyes in disbelief. It's you. Chapter 11:14. It was Lai Kai-shing in front of him, not Tian Xin 71 generation. Momo was shocked, but he also understood something. Back then, after Jean received the imperial edict, he was brought away by him. No matter where he hid or where he fled to, he would always be found by both Taoists and Taoists. It would be fine if it was those who were stronger than him, stronger in magic power and terrifying in Taoist power, but later on, even people from all walks of life could easily find him. Even when he hid under the ancient well in Song Clan's ancestral house, he was still found. This ringing bell. Momo forced a bitter smile. Have you planned all of this since you gave it to Jean? In fact, I don't know who can get the edict. I didn't think about this when I gave it to him. I can only say that everything is predestined. Bronze masked man, Lai Kai-shing said indifferently. Of course, I don't mind if you think it's premeditated. You stole Tian Xin 71 generation's identity. Momo took a deep breath. He suddenly felt fear. Taoists and even the administration had been targeting Tian Xin 71 generation. But if it wasn't Lai Kai-shing, but Lai Kai-shing, who was the 72nd generation, as the successor of the cloth gown sect, he was respected by the Taoists and demons. As a representative of the Taoist Association, he had half an official background. He might have been in contact with the administration for a long time. He had been hiding in the light. He even used the power of the light to openly grasp the intelligence of the Taoist and demon realms and the administration. With such terrifying resources, even if it was the cotton-cloaked Tao who didn't specialize in feng shui and metaphysics, if it were another person, they would often be able to see through the situation first. This time, Lai Kai-shing didn't answer Momo's question. He put on the bronze mask in front of Momo. This time, I came here to do something. It's an accident to meet you. Since it's an accident, let it be brief. Lai Kaixing seemed to want to leave. Momo subconsciously threw out the talisman in his hand. But this powerful talisman of Dragon Tiger Mountain was blocked by an invisible force before it could get close to Lai Kaixing. Then it turned into ashes. Seeing Lai Kaixing leaving, Momo hurriedly shouted, "Why did you expose yourself in front of me? Aren't you afraid that I will expose your identity? It doesn't matter whether you're exposed or not. Even if you know it's me, it won't change anything." Lai Caixing's voice had already faded away. He had already disappeared into the thick fog. "Come back, Lai Kaixing. Use your own eyes to see the truth behind this peaceful world." Lai. Momo rushed forward, but he couldn't see the enemy's figure at this moment. There were only a few people left in the villa, and they were in charge of logistics, so Momo's movement obviously didn't alarm them. After Lai Kaixing left, Momo seemed to have lost his soul. He stayed in this courtyard for a while before walking out aimlessly. However, Yin Xiaoxi returned at this moment. Not only him, but also the 3 teams that had gathered to prevent the appearance of the 6th Jade Dragon Pillar. The plan to stop the 6th Jade Dragon Pillar failed. When Momo came to the hall of the villa, it wasn't difficult to see a trace of depression on everyone's face. Among all the people here, Momo only had a short contact with Yin Xiaoxi, Fire Cloud, Evil God, and Mr. Blind. He quickly walked to Yin Xiaoxi. "Section Chief Yin, what's your plan?" Yin Xiaoxi shook her head, believing that this was the best answer. She patted Momo's shoulder, asking casually, "Did anything special happen in the villa while we were away?" Momo opened his mouth, subconsciously wanting to tell her about Lai Kaixing, but at this moment he suddenly remembered what Lai Kaixing said before he left. "Go and take a look at the truth beneath this peaceful world." He didn't know why, but the words that came out of his throat were blocked. Momo pretended to look at the others, saying quickly, "Nothing special. Besides, there's a barrier outside. Normal people can't come in." "Is that so?" Yin Xiaoxi looked at Momo thoughtfully, then nodded. Now that the 6th Jade Dragon Pillar had appeared, there was only one left. This was the most urgent thing. Yin Xiaoxi just kept an eye on Momo's abnormality. At least she wouldn't waste her energy too much at this moment. "I believe everyone is tired. Have a good rest. There's a tough battle waiting for us." Yin Xiaoxi dismissed them temporarily, then left with Fire Cloud, Evil God, and Mr. Blind. Momo actually wanted to do something, but he didn't know what to do, so he left dejectedly. "Go and see how to see." He unconsciously walked out of the gate of Crouching Dragon Villa. Looking at everything covered by the thick fog, he couldn't see anything. Momo subconsciously walked into the fog. Of course, he didn't plan to go far, but the villa seemed a bit depressing. He just wanted to change to a more unfamiliar environment. As he walked, a door appeared in front of him. Momo had seen this door before, this old pinewood door. After Fire Cloud, Evil God returned to the courtyard, he suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. As his disciple, Yin Xiaoxi was very nervous, carefully helping Fire Cloud, Evil God, to sit down. At this moment, Mr. Blind took out a small porcelain bottle, instructing Yin Xiaoxi to let Fire Cloud, Evil God, take the medicine inside. "Senior Qing Shazi, what happened to Master?" Yin Xiaoxi looked very calm, not panicking because of the chaos. Mr. Blind sighed. "Your master used Tiger Soul Saber recklessly, consecutively using 2 of Tiger Soul Saber's unique skills. As the saying goes, the first drum builds up the spirit, the second will weaken, and the third will exhaust. Tiger Soul Saber is an ancient demonic saber. Its ferocity is hard to tame. Once this saber intent erupts, it won't stop until death. With my help, your master forcibly suppressed it, so he naturally suffered some backlash. But don't worry, your master has a special physique. It won't take long for him to recover." Fire Cloud, Evil God, had already taken Mr. Blind's medicine and was now meditating. Yin Xiaoxi looked at her master's gradually recovering breath, then secretly heaved a sigh of relief. She then looked at Mr. Blind. "Taoist, now that the 6 Jade Dragon Pillars have been erected, Are you confident in calculating the exact location of the remaining seventh pillar? I need some time, Mr. Blind said in a deep voice. Before tomorrow, I will give you an answer. Although this formation was created by me, the appearance of the 6 pillars this time is very different. My senior apprentice brother has probably worked hard to improve it. At this point, Mr. Blind suddenly laughed bitterly. It's funny that I've always boasted of being the most outstanding person in the Linen Dao. Today, it seems that my senior apprentice brother's attainment has probably long surpassed me. Judging from the current location of the 6 pillars, my senior apprentice brother has really deduced the formation from back then to a near-perfect level. Heaven's will 71 generation has probably been maintaining and preparing for a long time. Yin Xiaoxi said, furthermore, after the Longsha incident, he has already started painstakingly working on it. It's not surprising to use decades to deduce a formation. It's not surprising to have a breakthrough. Mr. was the one who created this formation. He's the source. The 71 generation only managed to deduce it based on this foundation. So please don't belittle yourself, Mister. You're not like your master at all. Mr. Blind smiled. He doesn't care so much. When it's time to ridicule me, he won't be careless at all. You old blind man, is this how you talk about someone else's master? Fire Cloud, evil god, slowly opened his eyes. Master, how do you feel? Yin Xiaoxi asked concernedly. Fire Cloud, evil god, stopped practicing and stood up. Other things aside, this old blind man's medicine is still very effective. His medicine can't be said to be the best, but the effect has always been very fast. Mister, you're very talented. Yin Xiaoxi could not help but look at Mr. Blind in admiration. This previous generation disciple of the Linen Dao was not only proficient in the art of mystical arts, but he also had extraordinary attainments in the art of healing. Moreover, his own strength was also unfathomable. What talented? I said he's an idiot. Fire Cloud, evil god, snorted coldly. He obviously has outstanding talent, but when he does things here and there, it looks like he's full of knives, but none of them are sharp. Biting off more than one can chew. Even a 3-year-old child would understand this principle. But when it comes to this blind man, it disappears without a trace. What a pity for this monstrous talent. If you were to walk a path alone, your cultivation might not be weaker than mine today. Look, even that mediocre senior brother of yours has surpassed you today. Yin Xiaoxi frowned, but did not say anything. Clearly, this was not the first time she had seen Fire Cloud, evil god's poisonous tongue. If I were to walk a path alone, I'm afraid I would have been beaten to death by you today. Mr. Blind shook his head. Enough with the nonsense. Tell your disciple to prepare something for me. I want to go into seclusion for a day. Fire Cloud, evil god, waved his hand at Yin Xiaoxi, then sat down cross-legged again and closed his eyes, not saying anything. Ding dang. The bell in front of the door rang all of a sudden. It was the 3rd time for Momo to come to this place. The cold, damp, and all the bad things had disappeared here. He could even smell some special fragrance, which made people feel relaxed unconsciously. But different from the previous 2 times, Momo saw a new face here, a young man with a scarf. As for the metal dog squatting at the young man's feet, Momo didn't care too much about it. Momo saw Nero, and of course Yu Yi, who was the maid. At this moment, Nero popped out her head from Yu Yi, waving to Momo. Oh, the righteous little brother, long time no see. Are you here to buy something? Come on, let me serve you. Saying this, Nero rushed to Momo at an amazing speed, pulling Momo's wrist and taking him to a table. Come on, what do you want to drink? She was quite enthusiastic. Perhaps Momo's appearance gave her the best excuse to escape from Miss Maid's education, to serve customers. Why are you? Nero's enthusiasm made Momo stunned. Oh, is it strange? Nero squinted her eyes and smiled evilly. From today on, I'm an employee of this shop. Momo opened his mouth with amazement, but didn't say anything in the end. Looking at the lively Nero, he thought of the pain Nero suffered by Miss Maid. She couldn't even hold on for 5 seconds before collapsing due to the severe pain. Momo didn't think this could be the reason to kill indiscriminately. But after experiencing these days, he had to admit that this could be the reason for others. He gave a bitter smile. then congratulations. Nero gave a start, looking at Momo with a strange look, suddenly turning back. General Manager, I can't serve this customer. Mr. Momo, what can I do for you? Mississippi maid walked slowly to Momo, bending down slightly and asking. Momo looked at this perfect face, saying subconsciously, I don't know. I don't know why I came here. But I shouldn't have walked so far. Well, Miss Maid smiled faintly. Then, please wait for a moment. I'll call the master. Master. Momo gave a start, saying, Senior, you're back? Luaccio hadn't received any business for a long time in the lobby of the club. Undoubtedly, those who came to the lobby would be the club's customers. Mr. Momo, is there anything I can help you with? Luaccio looked at Momo, slightly tilting his head and asking. Miss Maid and Nero, who had also changed into a maid costume, were standing side by side at this moment. Momo didn't seem to be used to being asked in this tone by the boss in front of him, or at least the boss who he used to regard as a senior. He frowned, opening his mouth several times, but didn't say anything. Luaccio smiled faintly, snapping his fingers. All of a sudden, the hall dimmed. Darkness spread from the surroundings, engulfing the lobby bit by bit. It spread to Luaccio and Momo's side little by little. Even Miss Maid and Nero were shrouded in the darkness. The only space left was the 1-meter space where Luaccio and Momo were sitting. It was a miraculous scene. It was obviously dark, but this space was visible, normal, and very quiet. It was so quiet that it made people subconsciously feel a sense of security brought by privacy. Is it better? Luaccio asked softly. Momo nodded, not daring to look at Luaccio's eyes. He looked at the darkness beside him, suddenly smiling bitterly. Speaking of which, I said something that made you laugh at me. Luaccio asked curiously, what do you mean? Momo lowered his head. Senior, do you think I should buy something from you? Luaccio kept silent for a moment, saying slowly, it's not my decision to buy or not. It's only when you really have something you want to buy that it will appear in front of you. Chapter 11:15. I want to have a look at the truth. His tone was uncertain, but he plucked up his courage. Like falling into a maze, he carefully moved forward to explore the dark passage. Luaccio looked at him, remaining silent for a while. This kind of gaze made Momo feel like facing the sea. When he was in Louis Village, he looked at the rising and falling of the sea, the rising and falling of the sun, and the setting of the moon. It was the same feeling. Sure enough, it doesn't work, Momo said disappointedly. Luaccio shook his head. Mr. Momo, do you think what you see is not true? Momo was stunned. Ordinary people would only see it with their own eyes. But even if they saw it with their own eyes, they would be deceived, but they couldn't distinguish it clearly. Because you're always in the truth, or you don't know whether it is true or not. Don't rush to make this decision. Luaccio looked at Momo with a thin smile on his face, which was as thin as the mist attached to the full moon. How about listening to a story first? Momo nodded. Senior, please. In fact, it's a very interesting short video. Luaccio changed to another sitting position. He put his hands on the table, closed his palms, and leaned forward slightly. He began the story. Suddenly, one day, a scientist invented a magical cream. The story started from a press conference. At this time, there was a woman with a scar on her face on the stage. After applying this cream, she returned to her original appearance in just a few minutes. Momo gave a start, but didn't interrupt. He just listened carefully. Actually, that's not all. There are other miraculous properties of this ointment. For example, it can make people's broken limbs grow back, and it can be taken orally, so a dying person can come back to life after eating it. It can also be injected, so children with mental retardation can become smart instantly. Senior, are you kidding me? Cream? Momo couldn't help frowning. Luaccio didn't care about it, continuing, the development of the cream is still going on. More functions have been developed. For example, it can turn deserts into fertile fields, turn wastelands into forests, rejuvenate old people, and make wealth. It can make scrap machines brand new and even upgrade them. Since then, the environmental problems have been solved. The war-torn countries have welcomed peace. Diseases and hunger have become a thing of the past. In the end, the scientists even solved the problem of the production of the cream. It could be multiplied infinitely and become inexhaustible. Momo opened his mouth. Is this senior kidding me? This cream? Why don't you call a wish machine? Luaccio drank a mouthful of water to moisten his throat. People's lives can't live without this cream. But at this time, the country and the tycoons couldn't sit. Because of the appearance of this cream, the aggressive military operations could not continue, and all online production of goods had to stop. Stock prices began to plummet, and the economy was about to collapse. Momo gave a start, frowning suddenly. Suddenly, one day, there was such a report on the news. The raw material of this magical cream was made from dead babies. There were also many immoral materials added in. After that, similar reports began to occupy all the news channels. Suddenly, people found that all the news were negative news about this cream. Some people claimed that the cream was an incurable disease soon after they used it. Some said that the cream was actually a kind of virus, and they had personally experienced it. Some countries went to war over this cream. Then came the interesting thing. The country began to ban the sale of this cream. All the vendors who sold it were arrested, and all the factories that produced the cream were demolished. All the cream on the market was destroyed. Once it's illegal to keep a hairstyle for yourself, people started to fear this cream instead of chasing it. Senior, this. Momo was dumbfounded by this absurd story. But the story continued. Luocio's voice was so calm, like a pool of stagnant water that had lost its source and could only wait to dry up. This scientist was later arrested. He was convicted and could never step into the laboratory again for the rest of his life. The world returned to its original state. War and famine returned to some countries. Deserts and wastelands reappeared. People were no longer rich, but the rich were still the rich. Smart people returned to their original state. The amputees could only wear prosthetics. At the end of the story, we returned to the stage of the conference. But it was another product. A new cream started to appear on the market. This cream wasn't a magical cream. It didn't have so many functions. It couldn't bring the dead back to life or make people smarter. It only has one use, and that is to repair the scars on the face. But it needs to be used continuously. One treatment, 2 treatments, 1 month, 2 months. It can only be slowly changed. But it is effective, so the press conference was very successful, and people started to follow it. The story ends. This story had a huge impact on Momo. Countless thoughts flashed in his head. His face even paled. His Tao heart, that had been polished to perfection, seemed to be about to shatter at any moment. His voice trembled as he asked, "Senior, is this cream the truth?" Luaccio said indifferently, "It's just a story. Senior, I don't rush to make a choice." Luaccio waved his hand, letting the surrounding darkness recede. Everything returned to its original state. Miss Maid and Nero were still at the side. Nero imitated Miss Maid's submissive look, but she would scratch the itchy place on her back or yawn from time to time. Under Momo's complicated gaze, Luaccio stood up. "If you want to come, you can come. No one can stop you. But I hope you know what you want by next time you come." Momo was just sitting, but he felt everything was far away from him. He was just sitting, but the chair seemed to be moving, infinitely distancing him from Luaccio, Miss Maid, and Nero. He started to lose sight of them. He was pulled to a very far place, and the surrounding turned into endless darkness. Momo opened his eyes abruptly. He was surrounded by a vast expanse of whiteness. He was back in the thick fog near the crouching dragon villa. During the day, Rin Xiling was awakened by a rapid knock on the door. She had drunk quite a lot last night, and after meeting Lung Feng again, she happily drank some more. Therefore, after being woken up, Rin Xiling felt an unbearable headache, her stomach churned, and her mouth was dry. She really wanted to die. Rin Xiling opened the door while scratching her feathery hair. Seeing Lizzie, she yawned and leaned against the door frame. "If you don't give me a proper reason, I'll stew you with rock candy." "Oh, you're indeed the goddess of the editorial department. You look so pretty even without makeup." Lizzie's eyes shone with a desire to survive. "I heard lotus seeds are more compatible with pears with rock candy?" Rin Xiling pinched Lizzie's cheek. "No, Sister Rin, look outside. Outside. Rin Xiling gave a start. She frowned and walked to the window. Pulling the curtains open, she saw that it was already a vast expanse of white outside. The entire town had unknowingly been completely shrouded in a thick fog. Lizzie was turning on the lights in the room back and forth, but the room was still dark. Look, there's a power outage and there's no signal on the phone. We've really experienced the life in the disaster area. Rin Xiling quickly combed her messy hair back with her fingers and said in surprise, "What's going on? Didn't they say that the fog would spread here in 2 or 3 days? How did it spread all the way here overnight?" Lizzie shook her head and thought for a while. Maybe the fog swelled because of drugs? Rin Xiling rolled her eyes and frowned. "Where's Yukiko?" "She's packing," Lizzie said quickly. "Didn't you say that Major Lung Feng would send someone to send us away this morning?" "So, she started packing early in the morning. But in this case, do we have to leave on foot?" "No." "Will Major Lung Feng's people come back?" "I'm afraid it's very chaotic outside, and they can't take care of us." Rin Xiling shook her head. "No, Lung Feng won't go back on his words. Don't be lazy. Pack your things, and we'll meet downstairs in 10 minutes. This was a woman who could go out 5 minutes after waking up in the morning. So 10 minutes was more than enough. When Lizzie and Yukiko came to the first floor of the hotel with their luggage, Rin Xiling had already arrived and was smoking a cigarette. She was looking at the street outside through the glass window. The lobby of the hotel was very quiet at this time. There was not even a waiter. Rin Xiling lit some aromatherapy candles on the table. Day and night, this was probably the feeling. At this time, the door of the hotel was suddenly opened and a group of soldiers trotted in. They lined up in 2 rows, and there was a path in the middle. At this time, Lung Feng, wearing a military uniform, walked in quickly with a calm face. Yukiko subconsciously tightened her body when she saw the soldiers coming in. Lung Feng quickly walked in front of Rin Xiling. "Sure, Dumbo. Are you trying to intimidate me with your presence?" Rin Xiling frowned. "I said I would leave, so I will definitely leave. You don't have to scare me like this, right?" Lung Feng heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that Rin Xiling was still here. He waved his hand and gestured for Rin Xiling to sit down before he turned to the soldiers behind him and ordered, "Search." 2 rows of soldiers rushed into each room of the hotel. After a while, the soldiers came back. "Sir, we didn't find anything." Lung Feng nodded. "I know. You go out first and guard outside." When the soldiers went out, Rin Xiling knew something was wrong. She frowned. "Lung Feng, did something happen?" "I'm not sure. This town will become very dangerous from now on." Lung Feng said seriously, "I can't reveal too much, but the original plan of sending you away has to be put on hold. I'll send you to the place where we're stationed for protection." "We can't leave this place?" The one who spoke was Akiko. She asked in surprise, but she felt that her question was inappropriate, so she panicked and closed her mouth. Lung Feng was not angry because Yukiko was Rin Xiling's companion. "It depends. If possible, I'll evacuate you as soon as possible. In fact, it'll be more dangerous if we leave now." Rin Xiling pulled Lung Feng aside and whispered, "Dumbo, what happened? I know what I can write and what I can't write, but I don't like to be unclear." Lung Feng hesitated for a moment, then pulled Rin Xiling a few steps away and said, "There's something here that's attacking people. In the morning, we found a lot of corpses. Their blood was drained, and their bodies were like ice." "What?" Lung Feng nodded. The fog suddenly intensified early in the morning. It turned out that the first escort team was trapped, but when we arrived, almost all of them were dead. Only one of them survived, but he went crazy and said that he saw a man-eating monster. "There's really a monster?" Rin Xiling bit her thumbnail in shock. Lung Feng was not the type to joke, but this was too unbelievable. "We can't be sure, but it's something." Lung Feng's expression was grave as he said, "Actually, we discovered something last night. Last night, I left in a hurry because I received a report. In the back alley of the bar where you were drinking, several corpses were found. Their deaths were almost the same as those of the first batch of soldiers and civilians who were evacuated. From a morning until now. There are more corpses?" Rin Xiling asked with uncertainty. Lung Feng took a deep breath and nodded. There are more corpses. Now, even we don't dare to act rashly, let alone leave. Ren Xiling frowned, looking at Lung Feng. You just came here with a team. Don't you care about anything else? The soldiers from the army are all in town. Before we came here, we've already rescued dozens of people. What are you thinking about? Okay. Ren Xiling nodded. Just do what you need to do. I'll go back to your station with you now. Although Yukiko didn't look at them, she was trying hard to hear something. She glanced at her, but didn't say anything. She was still mindlessly eating the snacks she got from the counter of the hotel, but she also heard every word of the conversation between Ren Xiling and Lung Feng. Chapter 11:16. Rico tried to recall. She had indeed checked that guy's body. He was dead. His head was smashed into pieces, and his brain was splattered all over the floor. He couldn't be more dead. However, she didn't think that Lung Feng was lying. She couldn't help but feel that there was more than one person who was like that guy. Originally, this strange, thick fog didn't look like a natural phenomenon at all. At this time, Lizzie put her palm under the table. A white furry ball emerged from her palm and then jumped out of her palm and landed on the ground. Snow Fairy, walk around, Rico ordered in a low voice. The white furry ball quickly moved to the corner of the wall and quietly slipped out of the hotel. After a while, Ren Xiling and Lung Feng came back. Ren Xiling didn't say anything. She just said in a low voice, "We'll listen to Major Lung Feng's orders for now. Don't ask why, okay?" Rico nodded, and after a moment of hesitation, Ajiko also agreed. Outside the hotel, there were many people, adults, old people, and children. At this time, they were all holding a long rope in their hands to prevent them from getting separated in the thick fog. Ren Xiling walked to the back of the team and grabbed the end of the rope. She didn't choose to walk with Lung Feng. Lung Feng knew Ren Xiling's character very well, but how could he not care about it? At this time, two soldiers were quietly sent from the front to the back of the group. They converged on the road. Many soldiers rescued the trapped people from all over the town. They arrived at the town's gymnasium. When Ren Xiling and the other two arrived with Lung Feng, there were already many people gathered in the gymnasium. They were receiving some temporary supplies from the soldiers. There would only be more and more people, but the number of soldiers was fixed. Ren Xiling asked for help. She couldn't stay idle. Instead of letting her wander outside, it was better to let her do some logistics work here. Lung Feng let her do as she wished. At this moment, a soldier walked up to Lung Feng and whispered something into his ear. Hearing this, Lung Feng's expression turned serious. He instructed one of his soldiers to keep an eye on Ren Xiling and the other two before quickly walking out of the gymnasium. At this time, there were already two men in black suits waiting outside the stadium, and they seemed to be in a hurry. We're from the administration. Here are our credentials. One of the men showed his credentials. Within the system, there were certain departments and certain seals that only a very small number of people knew about. Lung Feng was originally in the local army, but he was later transferred to the capital and became a major. He was still considered an official in the capital, so he had heard of some things. Lung Feng returned the ID to one of the men and looked at them in confusion. Lung Feng could not help but think of the deaths of the innocent civilians and soldiers. The arrival of this mysterious department clearly showed that this was not a simple matter. We are mainly here to help you evacuate. At this time, the man quickly said, in this environment, if ordinary people don't have equipment, it will be difficult for them to move forward. Therefore, we need to use some ancient methods. Perhaps because they saw that Lung Feng's rank was not low, one of them directly showed off his skills and controlled a paper crane to fly in front of Lung Feng. This might be a small trick of the Tao world, but to ordinary people, it was completely supernatural and mysterious. Even though Lung Feng had experienced many storms, he could not hide the shock in his heart at this time. They quickly got to the main topic. Actually, we were still on the way. This should have been our first stop. However, we didn't expect the fog to suddenly increase and accelerate when it was almost daybreak. We were about 30 kilometers away from here. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the fog had already spread to where we were. The speed of the fog's advance was hundreds of times faster than at the beginning. Lung Feng instantly realized the seriousness of the matter. Both of you, let's talk inside. Lung Feng nodded quickly. Actually, they could communicate anywhere. Lung Feng just wanted to buy some time to digest this information. In the foggy streets, Wang Hu walked alone, muddle-headed. He didn't know where he was going, and he didn't know when the number of people in this town had started to decrease. At this moment, a white thing suddenly floated over and quickly landed on Wang Hu's shoulder. The little thing's body was very cold. The moment it landed on his shoulder, a chill invaded Wang Hu's body. However, this chill only made him feel cool. You are? Wang Hu took the little thing off his shoulder and placed it in his palm, revealing a smile. This little thing had a smell that was almost the same as pears. However, this little thing suddenly jumped onto Wang Hu's forehead and stuck to it. Wang Hu almost instinctively reached out to slap this thing away, but at this moment he heard Pear's voice. This made Wang Hu's muddle-headed thoughts seem to become much clearer. Can you hear me? Wang Hu. Pear's voice rang directly in Wang Hu's ears. Wang Hu nodded and quickly said, I can hear you, but didn't you tell me not to look for you? Why did you? It's like this about what happened last night. Pear's voice seemed to be very low. I just want to remind you that the matter of the guy you slapped to death last night is not over yet. Someone found a large number of corpses outside the town, and the state of death was the same as the one in the alley last night. And the time of the incident was early in the morning. Do you understand what I mean? Wang Hu frowned and said, You mean that guy's not dead yet? He should be dead. After all, he was beaten to such a state by you. If he could still come back to life, I would suspect that he had cheated. So, I suspect that he may have accomplices. In short, I just want to remind you about this matter. You should be careful. Also, don't look for me. Pear's voice suddenly stopped, and the snow fairy that stuck to Wang Hu's forehead also fell off and flew into the thick fog. Wang Hu subconsciously took 2 steps forward, but he quickly stopped because this snow elf had actually fallen to the ground at this moment. Its body seemed to have been sliced apart by something sharp, splitting it into 2 halves. Wang Hu was shocked and hurriedly and carefully held up this snow fairy. At the same time, he anxiously shouted, Pear, Pear, Pear. However, this snow fairy did not respond again. At the same time, a figure slowly walked out from the thick fog. This demon-like thing, is it yours? Wang Hu raised his head, and the figure in the thick fog gradually became clear. He knew that the other party was less than half a meter away from him. A black suit, black sunglasses, and a black leather suitcase in his left hand. As for his right hand, it was holding a silver retractable stick. Wang Hu frowned and stood up. He was almost 2 heads taller than this black-suited guy. Oh, big guy. This man was a little surprised at this time, and he quickly took out a black box the size of a makeup mirror from the suitcase, opened it, and aimed it at Wang Hu. But soon, this man used his hand to pat the box a few times, then shook his head and said with a helpless expression, Well, this thing can't be used. Electronic devices are really unreliable. Who are you? Wang Hu frowned. The man looked at Wang Hu in shock, then slightly opened his arms. I say, Big brother, this outfit, these props, I don't need to say anything, right? This is the style of Miao Zhenghong's administration. Wang Hu shook his head. Administration? He had never heard of it. Actually, he had heard of it once from Pear. Are you serious? There are still monsters that you haven't heard of these days? The man came closer and looked at Wang Hu up and down, then took off his sunglasses and frowned. But why do I feel that you look a little familiar? You know me? Wang Hu subconsciously grabbed the man's shoulder and asked. His grip was so strong that the man almost screamed out. This time, Wang Hu realized that he used too much force and quickly let go of his hand. Looking apologetic, Sorry, I didn't do it on purpose. I don't remember the past, so. Anyway, I'm sorry. The man was secretly shocked. He was wearing the latest protective suit developed by the administration, which could resist most of the impact. How strong was this guy's grip to be able to almost break his shoulder bone? You really don't remember? Then, do you remember your name? Wang Hu. I only remember this. Wang Hu. The man scratched his head and said, I haven't heard of any powerful monster called Wong Hu. But forget it, I won't mention this for now. Where are the people in this town? Do you know? Wong Hu shook his head and said, I'm not sure, but they seem to have all gone in that direction, right? I can smell the sin of many people, and they're all heading in that direction. Wong Hu stretched out his finger into the fog. The man pondered for a while and looked at Wong Hu again, confirming that he had never heard of Wong Hu's name before. As a new agent in the administration, he was very hardworking and had long memorized the information of some powerful figures in the demon world and Tao world. However, this guy called Wong Hu looked quite fierce. Could he be some kind of big boss? However, the man quickly shook his head. Those big bosses of the Tao world and demon world were on the front line now. How could such a figure appear in this place? Moreover, this Wong Hu looked like an idiot. In that case, listen to me, the man said sternly. According to the contents of the agreement, when a major incident occurs in the country has the right to conscript all the people in the Tao world and demon world. Wong Hu, according to the 7th clause of the 6th chapter of the agreement regarding unusual and dangerous times, I'm now officially conscripting you to help me. Wong Hu blinked. What was this guy talking about? Don't you understand? I don't understand. The man opened his mouth and then said angrily, I'll say it. I'm now officially conscripting you. Do you know what conscription means? I'm asking you to do things for me. Wong Hu was unmoved. The man patted Wong Hu on the shoulder and said, Don't worry, big guy. I won't treat you badly. Since you helped me this time, I'll apply for a medal for you from the administration. This medal is a good thing. If you commit any crimes in the future, you can reduce some of your punishments. This medal was indeed a good thing. It was a method that the administration had specially developed to manage the Tao world and demon world. It was very popular among some small demons and low-level Taoists. Especially for the demons, if they could get a medal, they would have more authority and convenience to walk in human cities. Of course, for a newcomer like himself, who had only been in office for a few days, the possibility of applying for a medal was almost zero. The man silently added in his heart. Wong Hu shook his head. I don't want any medal, but if you promise me that you can help me find out about my past, I can consider helping you. As long as it was because Li Zi had mentioned this administration, Wong Hu wanted to try to cooperate. No problem. Leave it to me. The man patted Wong Hu on the shoulder again. Let's get to know each other. I'm Bu Gao. I'm the man who's going to be the head of the administration. Oh, you forget it. Bu Gao shook his head and then looked mature. Wong Hu, listen carefully. I'm here with an important mission, so you have to help me understand. This is for the people and justice. Oh, my main mission this time is to support the troops and people trapped here. Bu Gao quickly said. For some unknown reason, the thick fog spread faster, so the organization sent me, the Star of Tomorrow, to support. Based on what you said, I guess the troops here should have gathered the people temporarily. Let's hurry over and join them. After saying that, Bu Gao walked straight into the thick fog. But after taking 2 steps, he immediately turned around and asked, Well, which direction were you talking about? It's in this direction. Is it? I know. I'm just testing you. Bu Gao nodded. Okay, let's not waste time. Hurry up. Let's go. This guy, there shouldn't be any problem, right? Wong Hu frowned and finally followed behind Bu Gao. In the hotel, Father Song and Song Ying were anxiously waiting outside a room. The thick fog spread faster. They had already evacuated to a safe place, but it fell in an instant. But this wasn't the worst thing. The worst was Song Howren. Song Howren, who originally planned to evacuate again, was warned by the woman that Song Howren couldn't be disturbed at this time. Otherwise, she wouldn't be responsible if he went crazy. Who knew what Song Howren was doing inside? At this time, in the room, Song Howren sat cross-legged on the ground. There was a thick fog around his body, and it expanded and contracted rhythmically with his breathing. Princess Chuyang's gaze was solemn. In one day, he directly practiced to the 6th level of the sky, reaching floating diagram, and didn't stop. This kind of talent is unheard of. No, this isn't talent. Chapter 11:17. There was an ancient saying that the emperor was the favorite of the heavens and the incarnation of the dragon. Therefore, He was called the Shinryu Son of Heaven. Naturally, this Shinryu was not the same as the Shinryu. The Shinryu Son of Heaven was just an abstract description. But even if it was just an abstract description, it was enough to highlight the nobility of the emperor's identity. There was also a saying that the Son of Heaven was protected by the Shinryu Son of Heaven and could not be invaded by any evil, and the so-called Shinryu Son of Heaven was actually the dragon vein. Every dynasty had its own unique dragon vein, big or small. The ruler of a dynasty was the carrier of the dragon vein's luck. When the dragon vein rose, the country's luck would be strong. When the dragon vein declined, the country would perish, and the Son of Heaven would also perish. As the former princess of the Great Qin Empire, Chuyang, who had enjoyed the pleasure of the emperor for thousands of years, naturally had the most direct experience of the emperor's dragon aura. This was not the ability of a feng shui sorcerer, but her own experience. Naturally, she would know when she encountered it. But because of this, Princess Chuyang felt that it was inconceivable. The evil man in front of her, who had brought her out of the tomb, actually had the faint protection of the dynasty's dragon vein. Just as Princess Chuyang was shocked by the origin of the Songhauren, the clouds around Songhauren's body suddenly surged again. In addition to the faint golden dragon aura, another strange power appeared at this time. Golden flames that were like the scorching sun at this moment, were jumping from time to time in the clouds outside Songhauren's body. Princess Chuyang only felt that this golden flame seemed to contain a boundless power. The moment the golden flame flickered, it even made Princess Chuyang's mind surge and her qi and blood become unstable. Although she was weak, her spirit was actually incomparably strong. Because she had been sleeping in the stone coffin all this time, she relied on some kind of secret method to temper her spirit, which prevented her from going crazy from sleeping for too long. It was precisely because her spirit was so strong that she could clearly feel the terrifying power hidden in this golden flame, as if it contained a trace of an indescribable power between heaven and earth. Whether it was the Emperor's dragon aura or this golden flame, they were extremely powerful forces that were hard to come by in the world. At this moment, they actually hit the body of the man in front of her, really made Princess Chuyang unable to maintain her calm. If Songhauren's strange fate was placed in ancient times, perhaps a demon star of chaos. Princess Chuyang originally thought that this was already Songhauren's body, but at this moment, Songhauren's body once again erupted another power that made her heart tremble. Divinity. There were gods in heaven and earth, and gods had natures. It was called divinity, a characteristic that only free gods had. Although this trace of divinity was weak, there is no doubt that it was real divinity. At this moment, the divinity was also wandering around Songhauren's body. And the golden flame, as if wanting to devour this trace of divinity, constantly chased after it. And the Emperor's dragon aura that first appeared in Songhauren's body flowed slowly and carelessly, as if ignoring the golden flame and the divinity, but became a buffer zone between these two opposing forces. The Emperor's dragon aura, the golden flame, and the divinity, these three powerful forces actually formed a strange and delicate balance at this moment. But Songhauren's expression was calm at this time. He quietly pushed the towering sky floating art to the 7th level. The 7th level of the towering sky floating art seemed to be Songhauren's limit, or it could be said that this was the limit of his first cultivation. The white clouds in his body, accompanied by his breathing, were crazily sucked into his body, and the Emperor's dragon aura, the golden flame, and the divinity that were entangled with each other also gradually faded away. Young Master Song sighed and slowly opened his eyes. A flicker of a flame flickered in his eyes, and then it became clear again. Songhauren twisted his neck, and his bones made crackling sounds. At the same time, there were pieces of hard shell-like material that broke and fell off his cheeks and neck. Songhauren frowned, and subconsciously stirred up the new and wonderful power in his body, and immediately shook off this layer of shell on the surface of his body. As if he had cast off his mortal body, Songhauren had never felt like this before. He felt as if every cell in his body had a crazily running engine, full of power. This is the power obtained from cultivating martial arts? How magical! Song Howren felt very satisfied with the new power in his body. Princess Chuyong, thank you for your guidance. Princess Chuyong? Princess Chuyong had turned around at some point and scolded him in a low voice. Lecher. Song Howren lowered his head to take a look. At the same time that he shook off the dirt on the surface of his body, it seemed that he had also shaken off his clothes. Looking at the angry and embarrassed Princess Chuyong, the usually carefree young Master Song suddenly laughed evilly. Oh no. According to our current etiquette, a man's chastity is also very important. As such, I have lost my chastity and can no longer marry a wife. Your Highness, please take responsibility. Princess Chuyong suddenly turned around and said with a surprised expression, Are you serious? This secular etiquette You actually dare to deceive this princess? Princess Chuyong had no choice but to turn around again. Young Master Song didn't expose himself at all at this moment, and his face naturally had a trace of an evil smile. How could Princess Chuyong not know that this shameless person was spouting nonsense? Maybe it will be true in the future. Song Howren laughed twice. When I have enough influence to influence the world, maybe my brain will go haywire and I will continue to promote it. Wishful thinking. Song Howren didn't care, and just casually put on the bathrobe on the clothes rack and walked towards the door. At this moment, his eyes and ears were very sharp, and even through the door, he could clearly hear the footsteps, voices, and even breathing outside the door. His father and Song Ing were outside the door. Song Tianyu looked at Song Howren in surprise as he came out in a bathrobe. Seeing this, Song Tianyu couldn't help but open his mouth. Don't think too much, I didn't do anything. Song Howren heartlessly shrugged. When it comes to giving birth, let Song Ing do it. Behind Father Song, Miss Song Ing raised the middle finger in Song Howren's direction. Howren, what happened to you? Father Song naturally didn't hear this guy's tone. He really wanted to hold a grandson or great-grandson. However, he gave birth to this son himself, so he could naturally sense that Song Howren was different. It should be a good thing. At this moment, Song Howren said seriously, Let's not talk about this for now. Did something happen outside? Song Ing glanced inside the room, but didn't see the woman in the ancient costume. Ever since Song Howren picked her up, Song Howren had been watching over her, and no one else was allowed to come into contact with her. She could only quickly explain what had happened during this period of time. The fog has spread even more? Song Howren frowned. What did the two experts that Mr. Blind invited to lead the way say? They went out to inquire about the situation, but haven't come back yet. Song Tianyu shook his head and said, For now, I'll have someone stand guard here. Don't go anywhere. Song Howren nodded. After that, the family of three had a little discussion, but they couldn't come to a conclusion, so they ended this short family meeting. Of course, Song Howren didn't intend to let go of such a good resource like Princess Chuyong. He once again came to Princess Chuyong's side and got straight to the point. Princess, you should already know about the fog spreading outside, right? Princess Chuyong nodded. It could be said that she hadn't rested at all. She had been watching Song Howren's cultivation the whole time, so she naturally noticed the fog spreading. Song Howren pulled out a chair and sat down. Let's not talk about anything else. Your Highness, shouldn't you teach me how to walk in the fog? Walking in the fog had never been a problem for Song Howren. Not to mention now, even before he started cultivating the Babel floating art, Song Howren had the ability to construct a three-dimensional map of the nearby terrain in his mind. Even in the dark, he could walk naturally, let alone in the fog. But he couldn't do it alone because he had a family to feed now, so he naturally had to consider all aspects. But Princess Chuyong didn't say anything. Song Howren said indifferently, When this matter is over, and my family is safely left, I will naturally return this sway, Ho Pearl with both hands. Princess Chuyong's eyes flashed with a hint of coldness, and she sneered, Aren't you afraid that I will kill you after you return the sway, Ho Pearl? I should still be of use to the princess, right? Song Howren said calmly. The princess has woken up in the modern world, and there are many inconveniences. Song Howren is willing to be the princess's pawn. The princess doesn't have to worry about me betraying you. After all, I still need the princess to teach me how to cultivate the Babel floating art. For this reason, I will naturally help you with all my heart. A combination of interests, each taking what they need, isn't that the strongest contract? The strongest contract, but also the weakest one. Princess Chiang's soul was extremely strong, and even her gaze had the power to capture people's minds. At this moment, she was looking directly at Song Howren, and Song Howren didn't dodge or move at all. The firmness of his will surprised Princess Chuyang. She frowned and scolded. Before that, hurry up and change out of your slutty clothes. Young Master Song smiled slightly and went straight to the changing room to change out of his bathrobe. After that, Princess Chuyang began to teach him how to walk freely in the fog. But at this time, no one in the hotel noticed that in the thick fog, a huge black shadow had appeared out of nowhere. It seemed to be a mountain. When the two visitors from the administration were brought to a room in the stadium by Lung Feng hadn't completely digested all the information, but the origin of these two people should be real. But no matter why the administration acted this time, and what was in the thick fog, for Lung Feng, the most important thing was to evacuate the local people. The two of you, according to a rough estimate, there are about 30,000 people in the stadium now. Isn't it a bit too much with just the two of you? Haha, Major Lung Feng, don't worry. One of the men laughed and said, "It's just a way to find the way. There's no danger on the way. As long as we get out of the fog before it spreads, isn't it easy to get out of here?" That was true. Once they were out of the fog and back in the civilized world, they could use all kinds of transportation, so it was much easier to evacuate. But Lung Feng remembered the terrifying thing that happened in the morning. So he immediately asked, "The two of you, is there really no danger on the way?" They probably sensed the hidden meaning in Lung Feng's words. So they asked, "Major Lung, what do you mean?" Lung Feng briefly told them about the discovery of the corpses. The two people from the administration looked at each other and frowned. "Major Lung Feng, did you bring the corpses back? We want to see it with our own eyes. Please follow me." Lung Feng nodded and gestured for them to follow him. There were at least 200 to 300 people in the first batch of evacuees in the morning. Due to the poor conditions, not all of them were brought back. Lung Feng only ordered his men to bring back some of the corpses and the soldier who was still alive but had gone crazy. When the two men from the administration saw the corpses placed in sleeping bags on the ground of the equipment room in the gymnasium, their faces seemed to turn serious. There were bite marks on the corpses' necks, so their blood must have been taken from there. At the same time, the corpses were extremely cold. What a strong chill. There's still a trace of demon power left. Not only that, their essence, energy, and spirit were all sucked dry in an instant. Ice-type demon power, and it needs to suck the blood of living people. There doesn't seem to be any demon race that fits the description. Maybe it's a new demon race that took advantage of the chaos to come out and go crazy. Let's get down to business. You're right. Lung Feng only saw the two men's lips moving slightly, but he couldn't hear what they were talking about. He had no idea what they were talking about. After a while, the two men walked to Lung Feng's side. "Major Lung Feng, we've checked the corpses." One of them said seriously, "If I didn't see it, it should be the work of a demon on our wanted list. But don't worry, Major Lung, this demon is no match for us. If we encounter it, we'll take care of it directly." Lung Feng couldn't say anything when he saw how certain the two men were. After all, he knew very little about this relevant department. However, there was a saying in the circle of high-ranking officials. The administration was a special person who was one level above the officials. If there were no special circumstances, they would cooperate if they could. It couldn't be wrong. Of course, it's best to have your assurance. Lung Feng nodded. "That's good." The two men nodded, then said, "There's no time to lose. I'm afraid the fog will spread faster. We must evacuate the people as soon as possible. I'll have to trouble Major Lung to organize it. We'll lead the way for you. After that, we still have to support other places. The area of the closed disaster area is too big, and we have limited manpower. Thank you for your trouble." Lung Feng nodded and immediately turned to leave. The two men from the administration looked at Major Lung Feng, who was leaving, and a strange smile appeared on their faces. Yin 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 yin. Chapter 11:18. What made Tianzi panic was that it seemed to have become air in the eyes of Miss Maid. How to say it? For example, Tianzi deliberately appeared in a very conspicuous place. Miss Maid was cooking the master's meal in the kitchen. Tianzi, who had rolled back and forth in the kitchen several times, still didn't get Miss Maid's attention. For example, he deliberately rolled under Miss Maid's broom and then was swept into the garbage spatula like garbage, still didn't get Miss Maid's attention. No matter how to strike up a conversation. Of course, it was impossible to speak ill of her, and it would never happen. It seemed that he really had no sense of existence, completely transparent. But this was obviously not something to be happy about, because the more it was like this, the more Tianzi worried about his future. I was wrong. I was really wrong. Miss Yi, I shouldn't have taken things to the Palai treasure house without permission. I was really wrong. Tianzi cried bitterly. Miss Maid seemed to think of something. She suddenly opened the cabinet, took out a decoration from inside, and carefully wiped it. I was wrong. I was really wrong. I shouldn't have left during work without permission. Please punish me. I am willing to accept any punishment. Tianzi knelt down and begged for mercy, looking up at Miss Maid's chin with his dog head. What should we eat for lunch? Miss Maid was holding her face at this time, as if she was wandering in the void. I was wrong. I was really wrong. I shouldn't have lost the body of the Black Soul Messenger, and even been put into this dead dog's body. I was wrong. I have embarrassed the master and you. Perhaps he had never been so pious and ashamed of his life. How about challenging the osmanthus floss? Miss Maid said to herself. I was wrong. I was really wrong. I was really wrong. Madam Supervisor, the most beautiful Miss Yi in the world, I really know that I was wrong. I shouldn't have used you as the prototype to join the Dark Maid without permission. I shouldn't have used it as an extension to prepare a mod. So it wasn't just a boss, but an entire mod. Finally, Miss Maid lowered her head with a smile and looked at the lunar dog who was crying on the ground. Tianzi suddenly widened his eyes in horror, his whole body trembling. Ashy, 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 ashy. The Tianzi opened its mouth, and its tongue stiffened. It felt as if cold sweat had started to slide down its smooth metal body. It had unknowingly said it. The biggest secret. Tianzi. Miss Maid suddenly called out softly. Here. Tianzi immediately stood up straight. We've been spending a lot lately. What do you think we should do? This. Tianzi took a deep breath and said passionately. Facing this situation, I think we should work harder. Strive to find more customers for the master. That's right. We still need to generate revenue. Very good. Miss Maid nodded, but these seem to be a bit slow. Tianzi's heart skipped a beat, and he quickly said, Not only do we need to increase revenue, we also need to cut off revenue. I won't hide it from you. Yi, Miss Maid. I sincerely want to serve you, boss. The boss is simply my second parent. It could be said that without the boss, there would be no second life for me. I will continue to be trapped in the white jade token forever. I feel that serving the boss for 500 years is not equal to the kindness that the boss has shown me. 600 years? No. 1,000 years. I want to extend the service time to 1,000 years. No, it's not enough. We're the most servants. How can this be enough? I've decided that from now on, my salary and year-end bonus won't be given to me. For the boss. I didn't know that Tianzi is so loyal that I'm almost inferior to you. Miss Maid smiled gently. But the service time is set by the master. If you want to extend the service time, you need to get the master's consent. Tianzi secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Miss Maid changed the thread of discussion at this time. However, I approve the rest of your request. You don't want transaction performance or benefits. You're really a model worker. That's of course. My heart hurts so much. Are you talking about something interesting? At this time, Boss Luo's voice appeared at the stairs. Master. Seeing Luochio come down, Yi quickly turned around and meticulously followed the etiquette of a maid meeting the master. Luocio walked over slowly. Miss Maid smiled at this time and said, "Nothing special." Tianzi just said that he thanks the master's kindness, so he decided not to ask for performance commission and employee benefits in the future. He also said that if possible, he hopes to increase the service time to 3,000 years. Tianzi raised his head in despair and looked at the maid. "Mississippi, 3,000 years?" Luocio opened his mouth slightly and looked up and down at Tianzi. He smiled slightly and said, "It's rare that you have this kind of heart. It's really good. Master, you flatter me. This is what I should do. 3,000 years. I still think it's too short." Luocio looked at Tianzi for a while and nodded. "As for the service, let's talk about it when your original term ends. As for the performance commission and benefits, well, it's okay." Luocio waved at Tianzi. Suddenly, a black fog wrapped around his body and disintegrated his metal dog body little by little. "You lost the body of the messenger. Now I'll help you create another one. As for the cost, it will be offset with your future performance commission and benefits. When you pay it off, you can continue to enjoy the normal treatment." The new black soul messenger's body was no different from before, because it was made of the leftover scraps after the transformation of Nero. When the familiar afro hair came back again, Tianzi suddenly rolled back to the main engine room with tears in his eyes. He seemed to have recovered some vitality. Looking at Tianzi's sad appearance, Luocio sighed and looked at Mississippi Maid. "The profit of the God King plan is very high. If it continues, the performance commission will be enough for Tianzi to obtain power beyond the limits of this world, right?" "Yes." Mississippi Maid smiled and said, "It's rare for him to be so loyal." Luocio shook his head, scratched Mississippi Maid's nose, and said with a smile, "Is Miss Loyal awake?" Mississippi Maid asked softly. "If she wakes up naturally, it will take a few more days." Luocio said casually, "Let her wake up naturally." At this moment, the door of the lobby opened with a click. Taisetsu and Nero came back with big bags of things. Nero's mood had been very high, perhaps because his body was relaxed. "Boss, we have a big harvest. The supermarket doesn't need money. Taisetsu and I have brought back a lot of things." "Is everyone in this town gone?" Luocio looked at Taisetsu and asked. Taisetsu said, "We walked around and couldn't find a living person, but we found a lot of corpses. They should have died accidentally when they were escaping. Because there was no living thing nearby, it was naturally difficult to find customers who walked to the club by themselves. So after returning from the Ponlai treasure house, this place seemed to be very idle. Of course, there were many solutions. For example, moving the club to another place again. For example, restoring this place to its former state. But Luocio was not in a hurry to make a decision, because there was still a large amount of money waiting for him to collect outside. Su Zijuan's transaction had been completed, but it was done by signing the bill. So, it was reasonable to pay the bill. This time, Luocio left directly with Nero. Nero couldn't help but roll her eyes. She walked to Luocio and whispered, "Boss, are you jumping crazily on the edge of whether your Miss Marionette will kill me or not? His heart is really not ordinarily bad." "Huh? Didn't you say you want to be my person?" Luocio said indifferently. "Then, it's my freedom to use you, isn't it?" Nero was stunned and couldn't find a reason to refute. She silently watched Luocio walk into the thick fog. "Why do I feel that the boss is the most evil?" Nero shook her head and quickly followed. They soon disappeared into the thick fog. At this time, Miss Maid slowly closed the door of the club. With her back to the door, she slowly locked the door and watched it gently. Only Taisetsu was left in the lobby. At this time, he hesitated and said, "Well, Miss Yuyi, do you want to go too? I can guard the door." "No need." Yuyi shook her head and looked at Taisetsu. "I have to take care of Miss Lu." "But Taisetsu, can you do something for me? This is originally the job of number 18, but she is not here at the moment. Is that okay?" Taisetsu nodded. "No problem." Modern technological products couldn't work in the thick fog, but ancient methods weren't affected. In the thick fog, a huge shadow was moving rapidly. If one looked closely, he would find that it was a huge black wolf. This was a special creature of the underworld raised by Ghost Baby, Ghost Wolf. Ghost Wolf was born to run in the dark. Obviously, the thick fog didn't hinder its nature. At this time, Ghost Wolf was carrying Long Shaw, Su Zijuan, and Jessica. This bead? Su Zijuan was holding Chi-Chi Kamaya's secret treasure, which was a reason why Long Shaw could still keep part of her combat power. Now that her status had been exposed, Long Shaw didn't intend to hide it anymore. As for the fact that Kelowna and Shinryu needed the bead to show their divinity, Long Shaw wasn't afraid to let Su Zijuan know that it would make people in the demon realm and Taoist realm panic. She took the bead back from Su Zijuan's hand and held it in her hand. Su Zijuan couldn't help frowning. Now you can't get nourishment from the earth. Chi-Chi Kamaya can help you make potions to replenish your chi and blood. But how many herbs can match your Shinryu-S blood? I don't want to nag you, but if this goes on, your blood will be used up sooner or later. Don't you know the consequences? It's better than nothing. Long Shirua shook her head. Su Zijuan snorted. Since this is the work of that shop, the one who started the trouble should be the one to end it. The next time we meet, I'll buy it for you. Long Shirua glanced at Su Zijuan and suddenly said, "You're using those evil souls in the secret seal, right? Since the era of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, the Xianyuan royal family has sealed countless evil souls. Is this what you're relying on?" Su Zijuan pursed her lips. "Anyway, these evil souls are still seals, and it's hard for us to destroy them. Why don't we make use of them? That shop owner likes these things, doesn't he? Since he likes them, and I can't use them, why can't I use them?" Long Shaw was a little angry. You know, there are many evil souls sealed in the secret seal, but have you forgotten that there are many heroic spirits of the Xianyuan royal family soldiers? Do you think that Xianyuan doesn't have to pay any price to seal these evil souls? Every seal, every battle of the evil spirits, there are countless warriors who step forward one after another, using their lives and souls to delay the evil spirits so that we can seal the evil spirits again and again. It's not that we can't destroy the evil spirits, but once we destroy them, it's the same as destroying the temporary heroic spirits as well. As the princess of the royal family, you don't think about how to save these heroic spirits from the seal, but instead spend them extravagantly. Then tell me, how many years will it take to separate these heroic spirits from the evil souls? Su Zijuan snorted. 1,000 years, 2,000 years? 2,000 years. Have you succeeded? 2,000 years. You who willingly accepted the inheritance and became the Shinryu. Have you succeeded? This doesn't mean that I won't succeed. Long Shirua also snorted. Su Zijuan laughed. What *T fate of the royal family of Xianyuan? What *T daughter of the emperor? Are we born to bear these? Why do we have to bear these things? Why do we have to sacrifice ourselves for this world? Zijuan, enough! Long Shirua shouted angrily. Su Zijuan wasn't afraid. She looked straight into her eyes and didn't try to avoid it. Noticing the explosive atmosphere between the two, Jessica hurriedly waved her hand and said, "Guys, can you not do it at this moment? Don't you have something important to do?" Long Shirua glared at Jessica and said impatiently, "Don't be capricious. Don't get irrelevant people involved." Su Zijuan didn't give in at all. "Anyway, I've inherited it. I can do whatever I want with it. It's none of your business. If you really want to interfere, then take it away from me. If you don't like me, you shouldn't have." She was interrupted suddenly. "Look!" Jessica exclaimed and pointed to the front. The ghost wolves stopped at this moment. There was a cliff in front of them. They looked around and found that the thick fog in front of them had disappeared in an instant. It didn't disappear. It was just that the thick fog didn't invade this place. It turned out that there was such a spacious place in the thick fog. Long Shirua and Su Zijuan looked down at the bottom of the cliff. At this moment, the bottom of the cliff was densely packed with people. At first glance, there were no less than 100,000 people. In the center of the ground, there was a huge hole like a sinkhole. At this moment, the hole was emitting scarlet light. Chapter 11:19. It was like a monster's huge mouth, swallowing one living person after another. But the living people didn't know what was in front of them. They didn't look frightened, but rather calm. Or perhaps they were delirious. What are they doing? Jessica asked in fright. I'm afraid it's a method to refine souls. Su Zijuan frowned. Something is swallowing the spirit of these living people at the bottom of the giant pit. If one looked carefully, they would see living people walking in from all sides of the thick fog. Among them, there were more than 10 guys in black clothes and bronze masks. Each of them held a bell in their hands. As the bell rang, the footsteps of the living people gradually quickened. Like escorts, they led the living people who were slowly walking into the thick fog to the edge of the sinkhole, and then jumped in. These bastards! How dare they do this? Long Shuo gritted her teeth. The secret treasure in her hand was shining slightly. Damn it! All of a sudden, a dragon's roar rang out from the cliff. After that, a golden figure rushed directly toward the crater like a falling meteor. Master? Jessica was shocked at the scene. Su Zijuan said indifferently, "The people are the bottom line of this country, and also the capital she uses to guarantee the survival of the Taoist and monster realm in Kelowna. Once the government of this country knows about this, I'm afraid it'll be a devastating blow to the Taoist and monster realm. But Master, the power of the Transcendents is too strong. If the Transcendents fight with all their strength, even if they don't fight to the death, as long as they escape," Su Zijuan said faintly, "humanity is in power now. If these guys insist on standing on the opposite side, I'll kill them one by one." While Su Zijuan sighed faintly, Long Shuo's roar resounded through the sky. "You bastard!" The loud and clear roar instantly shattered the bells in the hands of the dozen or so black-clothed men. Without the ringing bells, the slowly advancing crowd fainted on the ground. At this moment, above the crater, a golden dragon shadow was glaring furiously at the ground. "It's Shinryu. Why is she here?" Suppressed by Shinryu's unparalleled might, the 10 or so black-clothed men looked up at the same time in fright. Shinryu was unrivaled. This was the consensus of the entire Kelowna Taoist and Yao realm. At this moment, the dozen or so black-clothed men were enveloped by a golden light and were pulled into the air. "Do you know what you're doing?" Long Shuo's voice was like thunder. "Who gave you the guts to touch these ordinary people? Heaven's Heart, 71 generation? Tell him to come out and see me." Within the dozen or so light barriers, the black-robed men were all silent. "Roar!" The enraged Shinryu roared once again. His loud voice was like a shockwave that shook the earth. However, at this moment, one of the black-clothed men suddenly said in a deep voice, "Shinryu, what are you protecting? Is it this Kelowna or a creature of Kelowna? If it's a creature, we're also one of them. Roar! Tell Heaven's Heart, 71 generation, to come out. Way! Pilgrimage! Go! Ultimate technique!" Instantly, one of the black-clothed men raised his arms and shouted. Meanwhile, his body expanded crazily with surging spiritual energy like a volcano that was about to erupt. He broke the light barriers around him. "You're crazy. You destroyed your own Tao foundation." Before Long Shuo could react, the other black-clothed men who were imprisoned also shouted the same words. They burned all of their spiritual energy and broke free from the light barriers. After breaking free, they didn't choose to fight against Shinryu in Kelowna. Instead, they rushed into the crater without hesitation. They chose to merge with the thing in the crater. As if they had jumped into lava, their figures were instantly wiped out. Instantly, the crater shone with red light, and a blood-red bead gathered rapidly in the bright light. Long Shuo roared and rushed into the crater with her huge body. However, when she was about to grab the red bead, the space suddenly shook, and the red bead disappeared in front of her. Wong. It was the power of the dragon bloodline, the power of Wong. Instantly, the dragon's roar broke out of the crater with boundless anger. Su Zijuan slowly landed beside Long Shuo. At this moment, Long Shuo lowered her head and looked at the crater without saying a word. It's so good. Su Zijuan also glanced at the crater. Suddenly, she stretched out her hand, and a piece of broken bronze mask flew into her palm. Su Zijuan covered her face with the bronze mask and looked at Long Shuo from head to toe. You said it's so good. At least I feel like I'm alive. Su Zijuan still looked at Long Shuo through the mask. It's better than waiting for death without any hope, isn't it? Long Shuo clenched her fists, then turned her head and flew away, disappearing into the dense fog. Su Zijuan looked at her silently with a cold face. You want to protect both sides, but there's no such thing as having the best of both worlds. Anyway, I don't have the right to criticize you. After all, I'm just a puppet of humanity. From afar, Jessica ran over quickly. Master, where did Mississippi Long go? To be silly, Su Zijuan said indifferently. Don't worry about her. She's going through menopause, so she's grumpy. Jessica gave a start. She couldn't understand the relationship between Su Zijuan and Long Shuo. Then, shall we catch up with her now? Catch up? Su Zijuan shook her head. There's no need to catch up with her. The debt collector has come to our door. She looked to the side. Luochio appeared on the ground, full of people who had fainted. He walked towards Su Zijuan slowly. Of course, there was Nero behind him. Miss Su Zijuan, are you free? Boss Luo finally came to Su Zijuan and greeted her politely. Of course, he also nodded to Jessica slightly. I'm not free. Treat me to dinner another day, Su Zijuan said directly. Do you want to chase me? Just give me dozens of times of Cain's blood as a greeting gift. I'm very busy. Hearing this, Nero blinked his eyes as if he saw something interesting. His attention was attracted by this girl who looked like a young girl. Then, I'll hold a banquet for you another day, Miss Su Zijuan. Luochio smiled. Of course, I'll cook by myself. Tut! Su Zijuan snorted and waved her hand. In a split second, 4 light patterns appeared around her. Then they shot towards Luochio. Luochio stretched out his hand and took them into his palm. Su Zijuan said, This is the key. I've told you the location. Hurry up and move it away. The number is correct. Luochio nodded. Thank you very much for your patronage, Miss Su Zijuan. Then, I won't disturb you anymore. It seemed that he only came to collect the debt. When he got the thing, Luochio left with Nero without any hesitation. Su Zijuan frowned. Wait a minute. Excuse me. Is there anything else I can help you with? Luochio turned back. Su Zijuan pondered for a moment and suddenly walked to Luochio quickly, whispering something to him. At this moment, Boss Luo, who had a calm heart and the emotional stripping of the club, couldn't help but open his mouth in astonishment. Miss Zijuan, are you serious? Su Zijuan sneered. What? You don't dare to sell it? That's not it. Luochio shook his head. It's just that. Can you confirm it again? What you said just now? Do you really want to make a deal? Deposit. Su Zijuan narrowed her eyes. She waved her hand once, and a light pattern was formed in front of her. This is from the South Sea. Okay. Boss Luo nodded. Of course, there was no reason not to earn money. Thus, an ancient scroll opened up in front of the two of them. Su Yuqian slapped his palm on it without hesitation and said happily, Then I'll be waiting for your performance. Remember to work hard. Watching Su Zijuan flew into the thick fog with Jessica, Luochio stood there for a long time without saying anything. Nero only heard her boss muttering, It seems that you can really do whatever you want with money. When Bu Bugao and Wang Hu came to the gymnasium, they found that there was no one here. But Wang Hu said that there was a lot of human smell left here, so they should have left not long ago. Bu Bugao couldn't help but search around the gymnasium. Strange, did the troops here start to move? Bu Bugao furrowed his brows. Or could it be that someone has already arrived a step earlier and left with the others? Why? Don't you know how many people you have? Wang Hu couldn't help but ask curiously. He just couldn't remember what happened in the past, but his logical thinking was still very normal. Bu Bugao shook his head. Big brother, look at the situation. We lost contact a long time ago, okay? But if it's our people, if they moved, they should have left some marks for later people to know. But I didn't find any marks. I only found a few frozen corpses. Wang Hu glanced at the basketball court in the gymnasium. There were used materials everywhere. They should have left not long ago. It won't take long to catch up with them. Do you want to follow them? Of course. Bu Bu Gao said righteously. You don't know how dangerous this road is. How can I abandon it? Follow them to get credit? Or else how can you get promoted? Then you'd better hurry. Wang Hu nodded and said, I have a feeling that something bad is going to happen. Something bad? Wang Hu shook his head. I can't say for sure. It's a kind of uneasy feeling. In front, there seems to be something in front. Everyone, don't get separated. Maintain the formation. Don't mess around. Don't panic. We'll always be here. We'll protect everyone. In the thick fog, there would be the sound of soldiers shouting from time to time to stabilize the mood of the crowd. Not only that, this team had more than 40,000 people. Originally, there were only 30,000 people, but later the soldiers outside brought back many more. A team of more than 40,000 people could fill up a long street. The team was extremely long, and because there was no equipment, the soldiers could only shout at the top of their lungs to ensure that everyone could hear them. Damn it! Whoever says that our country's soldiers are bad, I'll go back and write about them. Sub-editor Rin said emotionally. Of course, the way she expressed it made Li Zi roll her eyes. However, this team had already walked for more than 2 hours. To the soldiers, it was naturally not a burden, but to the civilians, 2 hours of walking was hard to say. Perhaps they would only be a little tired normally, but under this oppressive and fearful state, many people were already mentally and physically exhausted. The team speed was also getting slower and slower. At the front of the team, Lung Feng frowned and looked at the 2 people from the administration. The 2 of you, we've walked for more than 2 hours. Why don't you rest here for 10 minutes? There are many elderly and children here, and there are also pregnant women. Hearing this, one of the men from the administration said coldly, Major Lung, I know you're worried. But I'm sorry, we definitely can't stop. You know how fast the fog is spreading? Any stop might cause us to be unable to keep up with the speed of the fog. Do you want to never walk out of here? Lung Feng also knew that this person was right. As a soldier, he knew that speed was the most important thing in war. All right then. Lung Feng nodded. However, he ordered his deputy beside him in a low voice. You go, get the men to put down the unnecessary things first, and get the brothers to carry the elderly, children, and pregnant women who can't move freely. We can't slow down the speed of our evacuation. Make it harder for the brothers. Roger. The deputy quickly ran to the back. Major Lung, you're really dedicated to the people. The man from the administration smiled and praised. Lung Feng said indifferently, the human heart is made of flesh. We're soldiers, and during wartime, we have to be tough. But now, when it's time to be soft, we have to be soft. Ha! The other man suddenly laughed. Major Lung, I have a way to make everyone less tired. Oh? What's a good way? Lung Feng was suddenly energized. The man opened his suitcase and took out a bell from it. At the same time, another man also took out a bell that was the same as the one in the suitcase. Lung Feng could not help but ask, what's the use of this thing? When people feel tired, it's because they feel tired mentally. The man chuckled and said, so it's very simple. Isn't it enough to make their minds not feel tired? This ringing bell can make the person who hears it forget everything and not think about anything. Think, 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 think. As the man shook the bell in his hand, the word think kept ringing in Lung Feng's mind like an echo. You. Chapter 1120. Lung Feng, who was on the verge of collapsing, suddenly pulled out his gun and pointed it at one of the men from the administration. However, the crosshairs were moving in Lung Feng's sight at the same time. Double shadows, triple shadows. He found that his body was very heavy and gradually lost control. Lung Feng shook his head hard, but it didn't help at all. Just when he was about to pull the trigger, the man in front of him quickly rushed forward and punched Lung Feng's abdomen. The severe pain made Lung Feng lose his consciousness, and he finally lay on the man's shoulder. This guy's willpower is really strong. The man shook the bell in his hand. Lung Feng, who was motionless, slowly stood up, but his eyes were blank. He is outstanding among ordinary people. After all, he is a soldier. Another man said indifferently, well, I'll go to the front and take a look. You take care of him. Don't worry. It's much easier to control lung foam." He smiled. The man who was about to leave nodded and said in a low and strong voice, "For the future." He also whispered, "For the future." The sound of the bell was like spring water gushing out from the ground. It slowly penetrated and spread to every place in the thick fog, to the ears of everyone in the long line. "Is there any sound?" At this time, Yukiko suddenly turned around and looked at Rune Xiling and Rico. She was sensitive to abnormal sounds because she was originally a female soldier trained in the Song family's village. Perhaps she was not just sensitive to sounds, but also sensitive to the arrival of danger. What is a sound? Rune Xiling listened in confusion. Except for the sound of footsteps and people's whispers, she didn't hear anything else. Maybe I misheard. Yukiko nodded and felt that her head was a little heavy. She began to be unable to focus her eyes. Unexpectedly, Rune Xiling suddenly screamed at this time. It turned out that Rico suddenly attacked her from behind and put her hands into Rune Xiling's neck. In this cold weather, Rune Xiling's frozen hands reached for her neck and she immediately let out a scream. "Lizzie, do you want to die?" Unexpectedly, Rico giggled at this time, as if she was not satisfied with Rune Xiling. She directly turned to Yukiko and put her cold hand into Yukiko's clothes. "Yukiko, you are actually hidden giant, beep." Ah. A bone-piercing cold made Akiko shiver, but at the same time, she woke up in an instant, and the dizziness disappeared in an instant. Sorry, it's too cold." Lizzie apologetically begged the two of them. A ball of white fur quietly blended into the thick fog and quickly moved to the front of the group. 3 steps in 2, followed by a few quick leaps, the man from the administrative bureau leaped out of the thick fog in an instant and arrived in front of a mountain village. At this time, the mountain village had been razed to the ground, just like he was in the eye of the wind in the thick fog. There were several streams of people coming out of the thick fog in an endless stream and then gathered in front of the ruins of the mountain village. The man from the administrative bureau looked serious, rushing to the center of the ruins of the mountain village, in front of a glowing red sinkhole. "How is it?" When the man arrived, there were already 7 black-clothed men wearing bronze masks around the sinkhole. Seeing the man coming, one of the black-clothed men said seriously, "The capacity of the life soul pearl is about 70%. Bring the rest of the people here, and we can almost refine it successfully." The man nodded, walking to the edge of the sinkhole, looking down and muttering to himself, "Million life soul pearl. I hope we can refine it in time." "Sure." The black-clothed man patted his shoulder, but suddenly he said in a deep voice, "Did you come back by yourself? What's wrong?" The man from the administrative bureau frowned. At this time, the black-clothed man clapped his palm in the air, and a heavy palm force came out. Not far away, the ground was directly blasted by the black-clothed man's palm force, and a white fluffy ball rushed out in a panic. The black-clothed man snorted and waved his arm again. A green arc shot out, directly splitting the white fluffy ball into 2. "You're being followed." The black-clothed man looked at the man from the administrative bureau. The man's face changed slightly, and he instantly turned back. Seeing this, the black-clothed man waved his hand, and suddenly 2 more black-clothed men followed. While they were fooling around, Lizzie's face changed slightly. "What's wrong?" Seeing Lizzie's face, Rune Xiling couldn't help but ask curiously. "No, I'm just a little hungry." Lizzie stuck out her tongue. Auntie Run habitually rolled her eyes. "Let me look for it. When I came out, I thought I brought a few pieces of chocolate. I don't know how long it will take to rest. You eat some first." Then, Auntie Run began to rummage through her backpack. But at this time, Lizzie suddenly shot out 2 thin ice needles from her palm. One shot to the back of Rune Xiling's neck, and the other shot to the back of Akiko's neck. Both of them fell down instantly. Lizzie rushed forward to support them and whispered, "I'm sorry. Just treat it as a weight loss acupuncture, okay? We can't go on the road ahead. Although I don't know what happened, it's obviously a dead end." Taking a deep breath, Lizzie carried both of them and quickly retreated, With her ability, it was obviously not a problem for her to protect herself. She could barely carry Run Xiling and Yukiko with her. As for the rest, she couldn't help even if she wanted to. But just as Lizzie retreated for a few minutes, a loud noise came from behind her. So fast. In the thick fog, the loud sound was obviously the sound of a bullet. At the same time, a flame instantly exploded beside Lizzie. Lizzie waved her hand and set up an ice shield in front of her. The ice and fire melted in an instant. Lizzie looked at the world of thick fog nervously. She saw a figure slowly walking out of the fog. The man held a pistol in his hand and pointed at the three of them. I didn't expect that there was a monster hiding among the ordinary people. I was almost fooled by you. That's all I can do. Lizzie was not in a hurry. She smiled playfully and said, Uncle, I don't kill, I don't do evil. I'm a law-abiding citizen. What about you? I haven't seen what you want to do. These two are my friends. I just want to take them away. Is that okay? It's not up to you. The man snorted and pulled the trigger again. Lizzie had never seen such a shot from a pistol. In a panic, she set up 3 ice shields one after another to block the bullet. But before Lizzie could react, there were 2 ear-piercing sounds behind her. Lizzie was shocked. She gritted her teeth, and a fierce wind and snow whirled around her. The wind and snow whirlwind was 10 meters high, and it forced the sneak attacker to step back. After a short while, the wind and snow whirlwind dissipated. At this moment, Lizzie was wearing a white kimono with a blue belt tied, like a butterfly on her back. So it's a snow demon. It doesn't look like a native of the divine land. Humph, a foreign little demon. How dare you ruin my plan? The attacker snorted coldly. He waved his hands, and 2 balls of flames appeared in his palms. On the other side, the man with a gun and another man in black were approaching them. Seeing this, Lizzie's eyes narrowed. She hugged Rin Xiling tightly and pulled Yukiko away. Yukiko, who was in a coma, was wrapped in a cold air and was thrown toward one of the men in black. At the moment when Yukiko was thrown out, a gust of wind and snow suddenly appeared around Lizzie. In the wind and snow, Lizzie disappeared with Rin Xiling. The man in black waved his hand and slapped Yukiko away. Yukiko hit a nearby rock hard. Suddenly, the rock shattered, and Yukiko's life was unknown. Chase, our plan can't be wrong. The man in black scolded angrily. The 3 of them instantly sneaked into the thick fog. At this time, Yukiko, who was under the rubble, suddenly emitted a cold air. After that, a white ball of fur rushed out from under her body and carried her body away quickly. The wind and snow gathered. Lizzie heaved a sigh of relief. She saw that the surrounding was white, and she couldn't distinguish the road. She lowered her head to look at Run Xiling, and saw that her lips were a little pale. Ordinary people will definitely freeze to death. Sister Rin, your body is really good. Lizzie's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise, and then she looked back. Yukiko, I'm sorry. After all, we don't know your origin. Whether you live or die, we can only leave it to fate. Leave it to fate. You will definitely die. Cold voices came from all directions like demons, which made Lizzie's face change dramatically. Those guys, they actually caught up with us in an instant. The billowing heat waves rose at this moment, evaporating the surrounding thick fog and revealing a large open space. Unknowingly, it turned out to be a cliff in front of them. Above the sky, a black-clothed man with raging flames all over his body looked down. Lizzie waved her hand and shot out a cold air, but it was evaporated in an instant before it got close to the man. A mere snow demon dares to be presumptuous in front of the Vermilion Bird clan. The man in black snorted coldly. Vermilion Bird, Lizzie shouted in horror. The one in front of her was exuding a pure aura of a big demon. She just came out for a stroll, but why did she encounter such a horrible guy? The man in black didn't care. At this moment, he opened his hands, and hundreds of fire feathers condensed in the air and shot down crazily. In the thick fog, the man from the administration said, Chu Lao, keep her alive and refine her soul. This snow demon's spirit is good. The woman's spiritual aura is full and bright. She is of high quality and can be used to refine the life soul bead. It will definitely be more effective. I have my own points. The man in black. Chu Lao shouted coldly. At this moment, a large number of flaming feathers were exploding around Li Zi. Each of them contained a boundless amount of flame energy. She felt as if she was a popsicle exposed to the afternoon sun, and her body was about to melt. Li Zi gritted her teeth, but she didn't expect Chu Lao's fire feathers to be so terrifying. Suddenly, bang! The powerful fire feathers broke through Li Zi's wind and snow. The huge force of the explosion instantly blasted Ren Xiling away from Li Zi. Li Zi couldn't hold on tightly and could only watch Ren Xiling fall down the cliff. Sister Ren, Li Zi screamed and desperately jumped towards the cliff. Unexpectedly, Old Man Chu, who was in the air, shouted coldly. 2 fire whips shot out from his sleeves and wrapped around Li Zi's body. The blazing flame power immediately made Li Zi scream in pain. Li Zi was in so much pain that she couldn't get up at once. The man from the administration saw this and couldn't help shaking his head. I told you not to hit so hard. Go down and see if that woman is dead. If she is not dead, bring her back. Don't waste it. The other man in black directly jumped into the cliff at this time. The man from the administration sighed, lit a cigarette with a lighter, and walked to Chu Lao. Chu Lao's fire whips had already wrapped around Li Zi. The flame power kept eroding her as a snow demon. Li Zi, who was in pain, didn't make a sound, but just looked in the direction of the cliff absent-mindedly. However, the fire whips that wrapped around her cooled down little by little. They froze and condensed into frost. Instantly, the frost spread all the way to Chu Lao's hands. Chu Lao was slightly startled and loosened his hands. The fire whips fell to the ground and broke into ice shards. It's not easy to find a place where I can stop for a while. Why? Li Zi struggled slightly, and the fire whips that had been frozen on her body shattered instantly. Her hair had turned snow-white, spread out. Her eyes also became demonic and pale. In an instant, heavy snow flew. The wind and snow rolled up and dispersed the thick fog around. Then it became a pure white world. The cold air spread rapidly. The man from the administration was shocked and subconsciously pulled the trigger. However, the moment the bullet broke out of the barrel, it was frozen and fell directly from the air. He didn't have time to panic, and his body had directly turned into ice crystals. Chu Lao was shocked. At this moment, his demon power was crazily expanding. However, the snow demon in front of him looked at him with a ferocious smile, like a demoness. The cliff was not deep. Therefore, not long after the man in black jumped down, he had already found the woman. However, what made him feel inconceivable was that the speed of the woman's fall was a little too slow. It was as light as a feather. Just before it was about to hit the ground, it slowly descended and finally landed softly on the ground. On the ground, lush green grass grew crazily and made a bed for the woman to lie comfortably. The man in black frowned secretly and quickly walked to the front of the woman. However, he felt that something was wrong. It could even be said that it was strange. A feeling of fear and trepidation caused his aura to suddenly become chaotic. He didn't know how many years he hadn't had such a feeling of fear, since he reached the limit of his potential. This woman, finally, he walked to the front of Ren Xiling and planned to take her away. He took a deep breath and forcibly suppressed the feeling of panic in his heart. At this moment, a lazy voice suddenly came from the thick fog. I say, this old man, I advise you to stop. The man in black had already made up his mind and turned around abruptly. Just as he turned around, a gust of wind blew from the surroundings and dispersed some of the fog. He saw a young man with a long scarf leaning against the cliff at this moment. The man in black narrowed his eyes and quietly stretched his hand to his back. The young man with the scarf raised his eyebrows and said again, Brother, didn't I tell you not to touch her? Do you have ADHD? Who are you? The man in black asked in a low voice. This young man's breath was hidden, and he approached him silently without being noticed. If this person suddenly attacked him, he might not be able to resist. However, This person seemed to come for this woman. The man in black quickly calculated something in his mind, and the hand hidden behind his back slightly brightened. The young man suddenly heaved a sigh of relief. "Brother, I'm already being very polite. Can you please behave yourself? Can't you see that she has some kind of protective power? If you touch her, no one will be able to save you. Is that so?" The man in black sneered. The young man sighed again and said, "Before she wakes up and notices anything, you should leave quickly. Otherwise, if you provoke someone you shouldn't provoke, even I don't dare to think about the consequences. Although I suddenly appeared and asked you to leave, you must be very unhappy. If it were me, I would also be unhappy. Who is this acting cool? But I can't help it. Look at my sincere eyes and trust me this time. It seems to be very serious." The man in black still sneered. "I want to see how serious it is." He suddenly turned around and stretched out his hand to grab. But at this moment, a silver light broke through in front of him, from the top of his head to the bottom of his body. His bronze mask suddenly split into two halves, revealing an old face. He moved his lips, and his body split into two halves at this moment, falling to the left and the right. "I told you not to move, but you didn't listen to me. My eyes weren't sincere enough." The young man waved the ancient sword in his hand, and the blood quickly shook off from the blade without staining it. "How serious is it?" The young man looked at Zeiling, who was sleeping soundly on the grass mat, and muttered, "Probably it's not enough to bury her with this world." He couldn't help but fall into contemplation. "But Taisetsu, help me do something. This is the job of number 18, but she's not here now. Is that okay?" "No problem. Help me take care of Miss Run. She's here." This seems to be the boss's. But she shouldn't need anyone to protect her, right? With the boss's ability, who can touch her? Because of this, you need to go there in order to not make the master angry. Very, very scary. Taisetsu, with the strength of this world, how much anger do you think it can bear when the master is angry? I'm afraid that even the master himself doesn't know. This can't be right. Chapter 11:21. The wind rolled up the cold air on the ground. On the cliff, the white hair that hung on the ice slowly dragged. Li Zi expressionlessly came to the front of Chu Lao. At this moment, Chu Lao's body was covered with a layer of frost. Li Zi stretched out her finger and pointed at Chu Lao's body with her sharp nails. The ice sculpture in front of her was shattered into pieces in an instant and disappeared with the wind. After that, Li Zi's face gradually showed a painful expression. A trace of blood came out from the corner of her mouth. She suddenly hugged her body and fell to the ground. After some painful groans, her white hair shrank back little by little. She gradually returned to her original appearance. Li Zi staggered up and came to the edge of the cliff. Looking down, she could only see the thick fog below. She couldn't see clearly at all. She remembered that there was another man in black who also jumped down the cliff, but he hadn't come up yet. Li Zi hesitated for a moment and finally chose to jump down. Her body passed through the thick fog at a very fast speed. When she was about to reach the ground, Li Zi was suddenly stunned. Not for anything else, but because she saw Zeiling. At this time, Zeiling's body was hanging on the branch of a big tree. After Li Zi fell to the ground, she immediately jumped up and carried Zeiling down the tree. Except for her clothes, which were scratched in several places, Li Zi found that Zeiling didn't have any bruises on her body. Her breathing was still calm. Li Zi opened her mouth and looked up at the ancient trees above her head. Ah, the law of not dying from falling off the cliff is true. Although it was a little unbelievable, there was nothing more to be happy about than that she could be safe. But Li Zi didn't find any trace of the man in black who jumped down after her. This really made her puzzled. Anyway, it seemed to be good to survive. This battle almost consumed Li Zi's monster power. She didn't think more about the follow-up. She directly carried Zeiling on her back and groped to leave this place. The snow elves who carried Yukiko were not far from her position. Li Zi didn't feel the uneasiness of the snow elves, so Yukiko should be safe. After Li Zi left, a dark mist slowly emerged from under the tree and quietly drifted away. At this moment, the two men in black arrived at the cliff. They had followed the signal left behind by the man from the administration and Chulao. But when they arrived at the cliff, they only saw a frozen corpse. The only one left was the man from the administration. It was obvious that his life force had been cut off. What the hell is going on here? A black-clothed man said doubtfully, then touched the ground. He wanted to grab some ice, but he found that he couldn't break the ice on the ground. Just now, there was an extremely strong burst of demonic energy, but it was only for an instant. Another black-clothed man frowned and said, "This matter is strange. We need to inform His Honor immediately." But right at this moment, a loud sound suddenly came from the thick fog. Along with it, there was a slight tremor on the ground. It came from the place where the birthing soul pearl was refined. Something's wrong. Hurry back. This might be a big scene that Bubugao could never imagine. On the ground, tens of thousands of old people walked toward the deep pit step by step, as if they were possessed. Bubugao didn't know what was in the deep pit, but it was obvious that these people had lost their lives the moment they jumped in. He and Wang Hu chased all the way. The traces left by tens of thousands of people walking in the stadium could be traced even by a layman, not to mention that he had passed the training and was officially appointed as a new agent of the administration. People were dying at the speed of dozens of people in a few seconds, which didn't leave any time for Bubugao to hesitate and think. Oh, I didn't expect to encounter such a big scene on my first trip. I'm really a man chosen by fate. Bugao screamed and rushed out in an instant. Who are you? How dare you kill people here? Get out. Wang Hu opened his mouth, but he didn't have time to stop Bugao from rushing out. Demon, come out. While holding the pistol in his hand, Bubugao pulled the trigger a few times, and the loud gunshots spread far and wide on the ground. At this time, several figures rushed out from all directions and appeared in front of Bubugao in an instant. Black clothes, bronze masks, everyone had a huge murderous aura. Bubugao quickly pointed his gun at several people in black, and at the same time, his hand trembled a little as he took out his ID from his clothes. Don't move. Administration. Don't move. Don't move. Kid, your ID is upside down. One of the people in black said coldly. I know. I'm just testing you, whether you recognize it or not. Bubugao quickly turned the ID over. Don't move. Don't move. No matter who you are, what you want to do, stop. Stop now. The person in black who spoke first suddenly turned his head and said indifferently, You and are all the people in your bureau, so flustered now. Newcomers. A man in a black suit with a bell in his hand slowly walked out of the crowd. During this time, many important people in the government are on state visits, and a lot of people have been transferred. Every place in the country needs people to stay. As for the disaster area, it's not small, and there are not enough people. Isn't it normal to catch new people to go to the battlefield? Is it? Then I'll leave it to you. The man in black nodded. Then he waved his hand, and several men in black escaped again. They all went to the edge of the sinkhole. To them, the flustered newcomer of the administration in front of them was really not a threat. Now was the critical moment of refining, and they were not in the mood to pay attention to him. Several people in black escaped, and Bugao had no time to react. Now, only the man named Yuan was left. Wearing the same clothes as himself, and looking like a man in his 30s, Bugao was a little confused. What's your name? When did you graduate? Which school did you graduate from? And what's your number? The man. Yuan smiled and walked slowly to Bugao. Don't move. You're with them? Bugao pointed the gun at him and found it difficult to maintain stability. Yuan pressed his hand slowly and said softly, Relax, I won't do anything to you. After all, taking care of the newcomers is the responsibility of the seniors. He continued to walk toward Bugao. However, he had only taken a few steps when a bullet was fired at his feet. Bugao chose to shoot at this moment. I said, Don't move. Can't you hear me? Bugao was sweating and looked around, but Yuan in front of him disappeared in a flash, which made Bugao shocked. Before he could react, a sharp pain came from his abdomen, and he bent down instantly. That's why I said relax. Bugao was in pain. Not only that, his gun was quickly taken away by Yuan, and then it was simply dismantled by Yuan and the parts were scattered on the ground. Yuan stepped on Bu Gao's shoulder and said indifferently, "You're very brave. The administration needs new blood like you, but you came at the wrong time. What do you want to do?" While speaking, a sweet blood spurted out from his throat. Bu Gao didn't expect this guy's punch to hurt him so badly. "You can't do anything even if you know. It's better not to know." Yuan directly grabbed Bu Gao's hair and dragged him to the edge of the sinkhole. Unexpectedly, Bu Gao gritted his teeth and took out a metal rod from behind his waist. He waved it hard, and the metal rod instantly elongated. He held the metal rod and waved it at Yuan. This wave made Yuan let go of his hand. Bu Gao quickly used his palm to support his body and jumped back to open the distance between him and Yuan. "Demon subduing whip?" Yuan sneered, and then his body instantly swelled up. The strong body directly broke his clothes, revealing his terrifying muscles. Patches of yellow hair began to grow crazily on Yuan's body. His head gradually became not like a human's, and his hands turned into huge claws. In front of him was a huge black tiger. The black demon tiger twisted its neck at this time. "It's more comfortable like this. Working in the agency, wearing human skin every day, my bones are falling apart." "You're a tiger demon?" Yuan opened his eyes wide. He knew that there were some non-humans among the agents working in the agency. But usually, these non-humans were senior agents, on duty in some places with high danger index all over the country. "Is it strange?" Yuan sneered. "Kid, I said that the old people take care of the newcomers. Let me take care of you." Bu Gao's whole body was cold, and his eyes quickly turned. The tiger demon in front of him was from the agency, and a bad news immediately sounded in Bu Gao's heart. In the agency, was there someone like Yuan? In the end, what was behind it that had infiltrated the agency? However, before Bu Gao had time to think, the tiger demon, Yuan, had launched an attack. In front of the demonized Yuan, as an ordinary person, Bu Gao's fighting skills were useless. The pistol that could shoot Taoist bullets was dismantled by Yuan early on. "You're really a newcomer. It seems that you're not even those sent to the various Taoist sects and monster clans to train." The tiger demon Yuan sneered. "You're a pure newcomer promoted by the agency, right? First time on duty? Then you really hit the jackpot, encountering such a thing for the first time." The tiger demon's fist easily hit Bu Gao's shoulder again. This fist made Bu Gao's shoulder bone seem to have cracked. Bu Gao collapsed to the ground like a pile of mud. "I won't waste time with you. You go down too." The tiger demon quickly grabbed Bu Gao again, wanting to throw him into the crater. Bu Gao, who collapsed on the ground, suddenly straightened his belt and took out something, throwing it out with a scream. It was a Longan-sized bead. The tiger demon Yuan saw the bead, and his face slightly changed, but it was too late to dodge. Boom! There was a loud noise, followed by a violent explosion. The explosion blasted a deep crater a few meters wide in the ground, and the billowing smoke and dust even spread to the edge of the crater. Bu Gao vomited blood, and blood flowed out of his eyes, ears, mouth, and nose. The sound wave of the explosion shook his face and made him bleed. "Kid, you've got guts." In the billowing smoke, a tiger roar sounded. In an instant, the black tiger demon charged out. Its arms were lacerated, and its expression was ferocious and frightening. "Damn it, this explosion didn't kill me. The people from the weapon department tricked me." Seeing Yuan rushing over, Bu Gao closed his eyes in despair. However, at this moment, an even more resounding and domineering roar sounded from behind him. Bu Gao subconsciously opened his eyes. He couldn't see what had happened before. He only saw this moment, this instant. The tiger demon in front of him, who couldn't even be killed by the special Thunderbolt fire, had his entire chest collapsed at this moment, and he took dozens of steps back before he could barely stop. Beside Bu Gao, Wang Hu maintained his side kick and slowly retracted his leg. "Damn it, this big idiot is so fierce." Bu Gao's eyes widened, and he looked at the guy who was temporarily dragged here on the road in disbelief. "Damn it, Wang Hu, I'll be your fan from today onwards." At this time, the black tiger demon Yuan, who finally stopped, took a deep breath, but he couldn't withstand the terrifying power that had invaded his body, and he vomited another mouthful of blood. He opened his eyes in horror, as if he couldn't believe it. "You, why are you here?" "Emperor," Ewan didn't finish his words, and he fell to the ground. At this time, at the edge of the crater, the remaining few men in black had found something wrong, and they all stopped refining the soul birth pearl. When they arrived and saw Wong, who at the same time, they were all secretly shocked. Why would the overlord of the demon realm appear at this crucial place? "Old Wong, I didn't expect you to be so fierce." Bubugao hugged Wong Hu's thigh at this time, grabbed his trousers, and climbed up. "When I go back, I'll definitely apply for a medal for you." Wong Hu frowned at this time, shook his head, and said, "I killed it. I don't know what's going on, but after this guy screamed, I felt like killing it." "Huh?" Wong Hu shook his head. No one seemed to understand this feeling, even if he said it out loud. He looked at the men in black in front of him, frowned, and said, "No matter what you guys are doing, just listen to him and stop what you're doing. This is not good. Not good." The men in black seemed to have heard the biggest joke in the world. "For you, human life is lowly, and you actually sympathize with these people. Is there a problem?" Wong Hu said suddenly, "Lizzie told me not to mess around." Chapter 11:22. Lizzie said so. Looking at Wong Hu's self-righteous appearance, several black-robed men subconsciously searched their memories over the years. Lizzie. Who was she? This was a name that hung in the mouth of the White Tiger young master, Huang Baifu, so she was definitely not a nobody. However, no matter how they searched, they still could not find any information about Li Zi in their memories over the years. This White Tiger young master seems to be a little strange. The black-robed men began to whisper among themselves. Could it be that he has reached an agreement with the authority, and now he's on the authority's side? After all, Wong Hu had personally rescued Bubugao and kicked the Black Tiger demon, Yuan, to death only recently. And after that, Wong Hu had shouted for everyone to stop. The more they thought about it, the more they felt that this was very likely. "Do it!" One of the black-robed men shouted at this time. After that, he immediately leaped forward and attacked Wong Hu with his power. At the same time, two of them quickly retreated and returned to the edge of the sinkhole again. Then, they entered the sinkhole one by one with the spells used for refining. At this time, seeing a black-robed man madly attacking him, Wong Hu instinctively raised his arm to block. The black-robed man's attack was very powerful. After blocking this attack, Wong Hu's legs directly sank into the ground. Wong Hu roared violently and swung his arm. There was no move or technique, and even his demon power was not very effective. It was purely brute force. However, it was this brute force that made the black-robed man's body feel as if he had hit a train. This sweeping arm directly swept him upside down. The black-robed man flipped in the air and landed on the ground. His palms scratched the ground, creating a claw mark of more than 10 meters before he came to a stop. As expected of the strongest white tiger, just brute force alone is already so powerful. The black-robed man slowly stood up. Then, how about this move? The black-robed man quickly stood in front of him and formed a seal with both hands. The air behind him was distorted. After that, two golden-armored warriors shining with golden light appeared directly behind him. The two golden-armored generals were both 5 meters tall. They each held a treasure sword and a golden truncheon in their hands. They looked dignified and had extraordinary auras. Holy sh**t. Why do these two look like door gods? Bugao exclaimed, "This is Mao Mountain's spirit summoning technique? Are you from Mao Mountain?" The black-robed man didn't say anything. He just made another seal with both hands. The two huge golden-armored warriors roared and swung their swords and golden truncheons at Wong Hu. Wong was also ferocious. His thick arms were like metal and stone, and he used his body to crash into the sword of one of the golden-armored generals. Not only did the treasured sword fail to cut through Wong Hu's skin, but the blade even flipped when it struck Wong Hu's arm. At the same time, the golden-armored general swung the golden truncheon viciously at Wong Hu's head. Unexpectedly, Wang Hu crashed into the golden truncheon head-on and knocked the golden truncheon out of the hands of the golden-armored general. Wang Hu moved his arm and flipped his palm. At this moment, he directly grabbed the treasured sword in the hands of the golden-armored general and threw the golden-armored general out. Seeing this, the black-robed man was shocked. He didn't know why the white tiger young master lost an arm, but his combat power was still amazing. What made him feel even more desperate was that the white tiger young master was still fighting purely with his physical body. He didn't release any demonic power at all. Among the four spirits of heaven, the title of the strongest white tiger of the current generation was indeed not undeserved. Old Wang, save them first. At this moment, Bu Gao screamed. The black-robed man here was just holding Wang Hu back. The remaining few over there were constantly sending living people into the crater to continue refining soul beads. Okay, at this time, Wang Hu also did not hesitate. He directly jumped up and slapped the two huge golden-armored warriors to the ground, and they could not even get up. These two golden-armored generals were spirits invited by this Mao Shan disciple. They were closely connected to his qi, blood, and spirit. At this moment, the two golden-armored generals were broken. The black-robed man naturally didn't feel good. He spat out a mouthful of blood and almost broke his cultivation technique. Attacked together. Beside the crater, several black-robed men with bronze masks gritted their teeth and attacked together. Among them, there were Taoists who were nearing the end of their lifespans and demons whose qi and blood were beginning to decline. Although they were no longer as strong as they were in the past, each of them was once a powerhouse who reigned supreme. Although it couldn't be said that they were old but vigorous, they were definitely not weak in today's world. Feeling the turbulent power of these black-robed men, the demonic power in Wang Hu's body seemed to be drawn. Wang Hu's eyes turned golden in an instant. He took a deep breath and opened his mouth. A loud roar came out of his mouth. At the same time, a strong shock wave came out of Wang Hu's mouth. Roar! The shock wave rushed up to the sky and instantly broke through the thick fog here and went straight to the sky. And these black-robed men, after the shock wave subsided, fell to the ground like mud. Their bodies even emitted billowing steam. At this time, Bu Gao only felt like his brain was being hammered by a hammer. It was so painful that it almost split open. This was only caused by Wang Hu's roar. Bu Gao didn't know how terrifying the power of the shockwave was. He only knew that these mysterious men in black who were doing extremely evil things were all defeated by this attack. At this time, Bu Gao limped in front of these black-robed men and took off the masks on their faces. After a while, Bu Gao suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air. This is the great king of Qingshan. 10 years ago, he massacred more than a dozen villages and disappeared without a trace. This is a Chuanjian demon Taoist. He once used living people to refine magic weapons and has at least hundreds of lives on his hands. And this one is this one too. All of them. When he recognized the true faces of these black-robed men, Bu Gao suddenly felt a chill down his spine. These are all notorious felons on the administration's wanted list. These guys gathered together. What are they doing? Bu Gao cautiously approached the edge of the sinkhole. He saw that at the bottom of the sinkhole, the crimson spiritual energy was rolling nonstop like a flame. And in the middle of it, an even brighter red bead was slowly rotating. Just for this thing, Bu Gao took a deep breath. He looked back at the people around him who had lost their souls. There were at least 70 to 80,000 people here. But before he came, how many people had jumped into the crater and become materials for the terrifying bead? Are you okay? Wang Hu walked behind Bu Gao and waved his hand to pat him on the shoulder. This made Bu Gao jump in fright. His face turned pale. He originally wanted to shout at Lao Wang, but when he remembered Lao Wang's terrifying roar, he immediately stopped and shook his head. No, I won't die. Wang Hu nodded and then asked, then, what are we going to do? Bu Gao looked at Wang Hu and then looked at the bead in the crater. But at this moment, Wang Hu suddenly frowned and looked back. He saw that in the thick fog, two black shadows suddenly shot out. It turned out that these two people were going to support Chu Lao. After discovering that Chu Lao and the other two had died, they hurried back. "There's more," Bu Bu Gao exclaimed at this time. Wang Hu clenched his fist, but soon loosened it. He didn't know why. As long as he clenched his fist, he felt weak all over. Wang Hu shook his head. It was better to use his palm. However, these two black-robed men didn't say a word. They came aggressively, but they didn't attack Wang Hu. Instead, when Wang Hu and Bu Bu Gao were stunned, they directly jumped into the crater. They jumped down and seemed to be shouting something. When their figures disappeared in the hot red spiritual energy, a huge red light suddenly shot out from the crater. At the same time, the red bead in the crater slowly climbed up along with the red light. In the surprised eyes of Wang Hu and Bu Bu Gao, a palm suddenly appeared as if it tore through space and took the bead in its hand. Wang Hu's eyes flashed with a trace of light, and he rushed to the sky. But at the moment when he was about to touch the mysterious palm, everything suddenly disappeared. Wang Hu rushed out of the red light and didn't touch anything. In the end, he could only fall down and look at all this in confusion. The hot, red, spiritual energy in the crater gradually dissipated, and finally, it became an ordinary crater that couldn't be more ordinary. Bu Bu Gao, who was still in shock, looked at the people for a while, and then asked carefully, "Old Wang, are you okay?" "Gone." Wang, who was still looking at the place where the palm disappeared. Bu Bu Gao sighed. He saw that the people who had lost their souls had fallen to the ground at this time. Bu Bu Gao hurriedly went forward to check and found that these people had just fainted. He was relieved. Wang Hu walked over and said calmly, "They should be fine. I feel that." "You're not a doctor. How do you know?" Bu Bu Gao asked curiously. "I just feel it, but I can't say it." Wang Hu shook his head. "Right, what should I do next?" "Who knows?" This was not something that a newcomer like him could handle at all. This time, if it weren't for the fierce old Wang, he would have become the dregs in the crater, or maybe not even a dregs. However, this old Wang was really fierce. Bu Bu Gao thought quickly and suddenly asked, "Old Wang, let's not talk about what I'm going to do. What are you going to do?" Wang Hu lowered his head and pondered for a while, and then slowly said, "Li said that I have to abide by the law. Well, I'll listen to you and abide by the law." "So who on earth is Li?" "That's good," Bu Bu Gao said seriously. "Old Wang, I'm now officially promoting you to a non-permanent member during wartime. Don't worry, each of us has the right to appoint our own partner as a logistician. I haven't chosen my partner yet, so you can team up with me first." "Oh." Wang Hu nodded. Bu Bu Gao said, "Do your best. With your ability, you'll definitely be able to reach a very high position very quickly. Maybe it's even possible to aim for National Scholar." "National Scholar?" Wang Hu frowned. Bu Bu Gao nodded and said, "The highest honor in our administration not only requires extraordinary strength, but also unparalleled loyalty. National Scholars are responsible for the safety of the real big shots in our country. If it weren't for the fact that the big shots are on a state visit and a few National Scholars are protecting them, it would be a matter of minutes to catch these wanted criminals. However, I heard that the #1 National Scholar has been sent out to investigate this thick fog incident. I don't know where he is now." "#1 National Scholar?" Wang, who was quite curious. Bu Bu Gao said proudly, "That's right, the one known as Fire Cloud Evil God. Legend has it that he's the strongest human. Anyway, do your best. My goal is to become a man of the section chief, and your goal is to become a National Scholar. Let's debut together." "Oh." And so, they returned to the problem of how to deal with the tens of thousands of people who were unconscious. Fortunately, there were many police officers and even soldiers from the military who came to rescue them. There was even a major named Lung Feng among them. After Lung Feng was rescued by Bu Bu Gao, the two men explained the situation to each other and finally understood the current situation. But Lung Feng discovered something that made his heart burn with anxiety. Rin Xiling was missing. We heard Bu Bu Gao say that before he arrived, many people had been pushed into the deep pit and used as materials for some evil creature. Lung Feng's face turned even paler. "Brother Luo, Dumbo let you down. He walked to the deep pit, his eyes glistening with tears. Major Lung. Lung Feng took a deep breath and turned around. When he saw Bu Gao walking towards him, he said in a low voice, "I'm fine. Protecting the people is more important. Let's hurry up and pack up. Mr. Bu, can you show us the way out?" "No problem." Bu Gao nodded. His original job was to enter areas with thick fog and assist in rescuing and evacuating the people. He was a little worried when he was alone since it was his first time on duty, but now that he had encountered Wang Hu, Bu Gao was not afraid at all. This was a sure win. Inside the karst cave, on the towering altar, Lai Kaixing slowly pulled his arm out of the pillar on the altar. After he pulled it out, a bright red orb slowly rotated in his palm. At that moment, an old voice spoke from behind him. "The quality of this divine spirit orb is not at its best." Lai Kaixing turned around, and behind him was a man wearing a bronze mask. This was the real Tianxin 71. "There's a problem," Lai Kaixing said unhurriedly. "Not long ago, Pit 19 encountered Shin Ryu. What is it this time?" The man with the bronze mask. Tianxin 71 asked in a low voice. "It seems to be the White Tiger young master, Huang Baifu." "It's him." Tianxin 71 lowered his head and pondered for a moment before saying, "We don't know what happened in the Penglai treasure vault. But since Huang Baifu appeared, I'm afraid Bai Jie and the others may have returned. And there's the fire cloud, evil god from the administration. The situation is very unfavorable for us." Lai Kaixing said indifferently, "It's okay. Although these two divine spirit orbs are not perfect, we have enough materials to refine 1,000,000 divine spirit orb." He waved his hand, and bright red pearls appeared out of thin air on the altar. Each of these life soul pearls contained tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of living souls. He said he was going to refine 1,000,000 divine spirit orb, but it was not really 1,000,000, maybe 2 or 3 million. At this moment, Chapter 11:23. This was the last place in the valley where the soul birth orbs were being refined. A young man stood on the slope with his hands behind his back. He was looking at the densely packed heads below. His eyes were indifferent, and his mind didn't seem to be on the progress of the refinement below. Soon, another young man came to the slope. Shiyu. The young man, standing with his hands behind his back, was Gongsun Shiyu, one of the heroes of the Qian division of the Xinyuan Palace. He had awakened a part of the Yellow Emperor's bloodline in the collateral branch of the Gongsun clan. After being defeated by the Fire Cloud evil god and forced to retreat, Gongsun Shiyu sought a place to heal his wounds. After his injuries were healed, he began to participate in the refinement of the 1,000,000 soul birth orbs. In this dense fog area, they quietly opened up a large number of such deep pits with the help of the fog. As the connection between the outside world and the fog was almost cut off, the soul-generating beads bypassed the eyes and ears of the people from the Administrative Bureau one after another and were quietly refined successfully. They were still trying their best to search for traces of the trapped people in the fog, but they didn't know that most of the people in this area were already dead. "Sure, Shui, you're back." Hearing this, Gongsun Shiyu turned around. Gongsun Shui was someone who had grown up with him. They received the teachings of the clan together, practiced martial arts together, and participated in the inheritance of war souls together. They were almost inseparable from each other since birth. This time, Gongsun Jishui's war soul was accidentally destroyed when he was trying to capture Nero. With no other choice, Gongsun Jishui could only return to the Xianyuan Palace and select a new war soul from the Martyr's Palace. There was a small problem with the inheritance of the war soul, but it's been resolved. Gongsun Shui said seriously. "What kind of war soul was it?" Gongsun Shiyu asked slowly. Gongsun Shui smiled. "It was quite lucky. It was chosen by the first generation of war souls." Gongsun Shiyu opened his mouth slightly. The so-called first generation of war souls were actually the generals who had followed the Yellow Emperor to war. Their souls were preserved in a special way, and they were the most powerful war souls in the Xianyuan Palace. The direct descendants of the first generation of heroic souls were called the second generation of heroic souls, and so on until the fourth generation. Then, They agreed to be called the fifth generation of fighting souls. Gongsun Shiyu and Gongsun Jishui received the inheritance of the battle soul together. Because Gongsun Shiyu had awakened the bloodline of the Yellow Emperor, he received the first generation battle soul the first time he came in contact with it. Moreover, it was one of the first generation battle souls, while Gongsun Jishui only received the second generation battle soul. I didn't expect you to profit from your misfortune. Gongsun Shiyu nodded. Gazing into the distance, she said in a low voice, "First generation, you're gradually catching up, sure sway." At this time, Gongsun Jishui did not notice the trace of disharmony in Gongsun Shiyu's tone. Perhaps the ancestors responded to me. In the current situation, I cannot be a burden. Then, Gongsun Jishui walked to the edge of the slope and looked down at the dark mass of figures. He frowned and said, "See, do we really have to help Lai Kai Sheng to this extent? Even though we, as martial cultivators, do not have the concept of karma and sin. But after all, your shocking Huangji scripture is to help the world. You are walking the path of man." "I know what I am doing." Gongsun Shiyu shook his head. The monarch's shocking world scripture is the #1 martial art in the world for the emperor of mankind to cultivate. Since ancient times, there have only been a handful of people who have been able to cultivate it to the emperor realm, and the only one who was able to cultivate it to the highest level, the emperor realm, was the Yellow Emperor who created it. Now, I have been lingering in the emperor realm for a long time, and I still can't break through. Do you know what I lack? What is it? Dragon Chi. Gongsun Shiyu looked down at the dark mass of heads coldly again. The Dragon Chi of the Shinryu Emperor. Only by becoming the Emperor of the human world and absorbing the Dragon Chi of the Shinryu Emperor into my body can I take another step forward and enter the Emperor realm of the shocking Huangji scripture. This is what Lai Kaixing promised you. Gongsun Jishui suddenly asked in a low voice. He promised me? Gongsun Shiyu said indifferently. The younger generation of the Qian division of the Xianyuan Palace will arrive in a few days. I will let him fulfill his lifelong wish, and then this world will be mine. There is no such thing as who can promise who. Restoring the imperial system, building a new dynasty, breaking through the new realm of the shocking Huangji scripture as the emperor of a new dynasty, and pursuing the pinnacle of power. This was Gongsun Shiyu's ultimate goal. But the Xianyuan Palace's motto was to hide from the world, and only when Kelowna was in danger would they make a move. Gongsun Shiyu's idea was the same as breaking the thousands of years of Xianyuan Palace's motto. Not to mention whether the older generation of the Qian division would agree, the Kuan division would probably jump out to stop him. Gongsun Jishui sighed. The shocking Huangji scripture is only one of the 3 great martial arts of the Xianyuan Palace. Shiyu, with your talent, if you cultivated the other 2 martial arts, you would have reached the peak already. Why do you have to do this? Because only the shocking Huangji scripture can reach the pinnacle of the scenery. Gongsun Shiyu said faintly, just like how the Shinryu of Kelowna stood at the pinnacle, or that golden-haired woman that day, that kind of pinnacle power. What kind of color is this world in their eyes? Don't tell me. You don't want to know? Gongsun Jishui was silent for a moment. He decided to skip this topic. When I came here, I went to Lai Caixing's place first. From what I saw, the number of generating soul orbs seems to be enough. This last trap is dispensable. Since this one has already been refined to this point, I might as well finish it. Gongsun Shiyu said indifferently. The ones here are just fake objects. There aren't many with true souls. Besides, the Xianyuan Palace is not the underworld. Why would they care about the 6 paths of reincarnation? However, right after Gongsun Shiyu finished saying those words, a commotion suddenly sounded from below. Gongsun Shiyu was only supervising the last trap. The ones who were actually refining were the group of black-robed men with bronze masks. These people or demons were summoned by Lai Kaixing. They had already lost hope. No matter how much they killed, it wouldn't hurt them. As the saying goes, a dead pig fears no boiling water. This was probably the case. Let's go down and take a look. Gongsun Shiyu said softly. He tiptoed lightly, like a startled swan. At the edge of the sinkhole, the clothes on the arm of a black-robed man were torn. Not only that, the bronze mask on his face was also shattered, revealing half of an old and terrifying face full of scars. And right in front of this black-robed man, there was a youth who looked to be about 13 or 14 years old, a demon. There was a wound about 10 centimeters long on this demon's shoulder. At this moment, the little boy was pressed on the ground with all four limbs, like a wild beast that was difficult to tame. Behind this little boy, there was another young man who looked slightly older. At this moment, the slightly older young man said indifferently, "Jouer, Fong, didn't I tell you that you must press forward with indomitable will once you throw out a punch? You could have ended this bastard's life with a single punch, but because of your hesitation, he managed to keep his dog life." The little boy's ferocious face suddenly turned bitter. "Big brother, even if you say so, I really don't understand. What is the realm of indomitable will? Figure it out yourself." The slightly older boy snorted softly, turned around, and stared intently at the blood-like aura rolling in the sinkhole. As for the edge of the sinkhole, there were black-robed men who were constantly casting symbols into the sinkhole, as if they were indifferent to what was happening outside. Zhuefeng sighed, shrugged his head, and once again put on a look that he thought was very fierce, facing the black-robed man in front of him. Well, although it was a bit difficult to fight, it was much easier to deal with compared to Sun Shaosheng. At least, he was not the one who was beaten up. The conversation between the two young men, Zhuefeng and Demo Xiaofei, was heard by the black-robed man with a broken bronze mask. At this moment, he was fuming with anger. "How dare you? I'm so pissed off." Seeing that the black-robed man seemed to be desperate, his face suddenly flushed. Zhuefeng's heart suddenly thumped. Since brother Mo Xiaofei became abnormal, he really fought with whoever he met. For example, this time, after brother Mo Xiaofei saw the living people here being pushed into the sinkhole, he was furious for some reason and directly kicked him out. Then, he fought with the black-robed man for a few moves. The realm of indomitable will. Zhuefeng really didn't move. It seemed that Sun Shaosheng had said something similar when he was a coach. However, even if he didn't move, it didn't prevent Zhuefeng from fighting at this time. Although he couldn't achieve the realm of indomitable will, it was always right to go all out. In the face of the black-robed man's desperate attack, Zhuefeng stacked the greedy wolf's supernatural power on his body without saying a word. Then he launched the fist skill that he learned from brother Mo Xiaofei. This was already Zhuefeng's strongest attack so far. The first style of Imperial Shocking Fist, Greedy Wolf's Supernatural Power Godspeed, Greedy Wolf's Supernatural Power Giant Strength, Greedy Wolf's Supernatural Power King Kong. The mighty punch had not really launched, but it had already caused waves of wind, blowing sand and stones around. Zhuefeng's momentum also soared crazily at this moment. This was not a move driven by the martial cultivation's true power, but a combination of a large amount of demonic power and the little bit of true power that Zhuefeng had cultivated during this period of time. The vigorous demonic power added a demonic aura to this world-swallowing punch. Under full concentration, Zhuefeng's essence, qi, and spirit were almost twisted into one. He still didn't know what the realm of indomitable will was. He only had a strong desire at this moment. That was to launch this punch and knock down the opponent in front of him. Not far away, feeling the complex aura of Zhuefeng's punch, Mo Xiaofei flashed a glimmer of light in his eyes. He nodded with satisfaction. Instinct. I may have released a monster. At this moment, the black-robed man had been completely controlled by the momentum of Zhuefeng's punch. He was motionless. Finally, Zhuefeng's momentum was about to reach the peak. All the power in his body was twisted into one, and he had reached the limit. But right at this moment, a similarly majestic aura suddenly shot out. This sudden surge of majestic aura seemed to be quite similar to Zhuefeng's punch, but it was much purer. Zhuefeng's momentum that was about to reach the peak suddenly deflated like a balloon because of this majestic momentum. In a hurry, Zhuefeng could only barely launch this punch. Bang! Loud noise. The fist did not hit the black-robed man. What the fist hit was another fist, Gongsun Shiyu's fist. The shockwave from the collision of the two fists instantly blew the surrounding living people to the ground. People fell down and rose like dominoes. In the end, Zhuefeng spat out a mouthful of blood. He was actually forced to retreat by Gongsun Shiyu's fist. His body directly flew out and hit a huge rock. Seeing this, Emo Xiaofei suddenly sighed. What a pity. Gongsun Shiyu squinted his eyes and said coldly, "What's a pity?" Emo Xiaofei casually glanced at Gongsun Shiyu and said indifferently, "If you were a little slower, his fist momentum would be complete and perfect. Then, the power of this punch would be fully exerted, and his punching skill would be further improved." Then, Emo Xiaofei shook his head. "But it doesn't matter. People who learn martial arts need to be indomitable. He hasn't learned martial arts for a long time. Although his talent is amazing, his foundation is not stable. This failure is not a bad thing. If he can pick it up again in the future, his fist intent will be more complete and thorough. You could be considered to have made a contribution." Gongsun Shiyu stared at the young guy in front of him. This guy had a strange aura that didn't match his age at all. Even the true force inside Gongsun Shiyu's body was faintly becoming obscure at this moment. This made him quite surprised. At this moment, Gongsun Shiyu asked in a low voice, "Where did you learn this punching skill of the monster clan?" Emo Xiaofei ignored him. 2,000 years ago, he was the only one who dared to ask the world. No one in the world dared to ask him face to face. He waved his hand and pointed at the sinkhole, asking in a low voice, "You evildoers, how dare you refine such an evil thing here? What do you want?" Young Master Gongsun, the soul-generating bead, is about to be refined successfully. Don't let anyone destroy it. Please kill this man and this monster. The black-robed man with the broken mask screamed at this moment. "How dare you?" Unexpectedly, his words directly aroused the hidden viciousness of Emo Xiaofei. Emo Xiaofei opened his eyes and looked at the black-robed man, saying in a low voice, "You deserve to die." Two simple words. With a thud, the black-robed man's knees directly hit the ground. It was so hard that the soil was overturned. But what was more shocking was that the black-robed man's head was lowered. Gongsun Shishui hurriedly came forward to check. Instantly, he was shocked. He looked at Gongsun Shiyu and said solemnly, "He's dead. Life and death are decided by a single word." Gongsun Shiyu squeezed out a voice from his throat. "Who are you?" Chapter 1124. Probably everyone would be angry when they heard such an answer, especially the arrogant ones. Gongsun Shiyu chuckled in anger. His voice was calm and powerful. "Sir, aren't you afraid of spraining your back when you talk?" As if to prove his words, something exploded behind Emo Xiaofei at this moment. A loud explosion was heard, but no smoke or fire could be seen. It sounded like a sudden explosion in the air, and Emo Xiaofei's figure shook slightly because of it. Seeing this, Gongsun Shishui opened his mouth in surprise. "Shiyu, when did you? It's not impossible to achieve the same thing with the mind." Gongsun Shiyu said blandly, "When you're strong enough, you can do it." It wasn't an explanation for Gongsun Shishui, but for Emo Xiaofei. "You've cultivated the shocking the world scripture well." Emo Xiaofei was expressionless. Gongsun family is indeed the Yellow Emperor's descendant. You're much better than others. The Yellow Emperor is kind enough to leave you such a good descendant. Unfortunately, your descendants are not good enough. How arrogant! This time, even Gongsun Shishui couldn't hold back his anger. For Xinyuan Palace, especially the Gongsun family of the Qian clan, the Yellow Emperor was their faith. Nobody could stand someone talking about their ancestors. Meanwhile, Gongsun Shiyu sneered. His true force rolled out of his body like smoke signals, and the white flame condensed into the shadow of a majestic general. Unexpectedly, Emo Xiaofei shook his head and said, "I promise that if I meet any descendant of the Gongsun family who made a mistake in the future, I'll show mercy. You two can leave now. Go back and think about what Yellow Emperor Xinyuan left for you, what he wants you to do, and what you shouldn't do. Also, you've cultivated the shocking the world scripture in the wrong direction." That's all I have to say. I. Gong Sun Shiyu narrowed his eyes. He seemed to have thought of something, but he couldn't catch it. On a whim, his fighting spirit inexplicably soared. The difficult problem of the cultivation method that had troubled him for so many years had a faint feeling of loosening at this moment. For martial artists, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Gong Sun Shiyu had a feeling that as long as he fought this person and won, he wouldn't even need to become the emperor. He would be able to reach a whole new level of cultivation from another direction. A bright light flashed through his eyes, and his aura soared crazily in an instant. The strength of the soaring aura shook the blood and chi of the black-clothed men who were continuously making hand seals in the pit. They had no choice but to stop and even spit out a mouthful of blood. Perhaps it was because Gong Sun Shiyu's aura was too strong at this moment. Mo Xiaofei also emitted an aura that could compete with it, and it was slightly stronger than Gong Sun Shiyu's. Gong Sun Shiyu had shaken everyone, but he still couldn't shake Mo Xiaofei. You really do practice the Imperial Extreme Shocking World Sutra. Gong Sun Shiyu walked forward. Who are you? You are not from the Gong Sun family. Where did you learn this from? You call yourself the Emperor? I'm afraid you also want to fight for the world and deduce the cultivation method to the highest level, right? Gong Sun Hua, our family once had a traitor, and we don't know whether he is still alive or not. Did you learn this cultivation method from him? This was almost the only possibility that Gong Sun Shiyu could think of. Hearing Gong Sun Shiyu's analysis, Gong Sun Shishui gave a start, and then didn't dare to frown, because he also felt that this was the reason. However, this wasn't the case. Mo Xiaofei's cultivation method came from Xinyuan Palace, which was a top secret of Xinyuan Palace. Gong Sun Hua? Mo Xiaofei thought of the Gong Sun family member who tried to challenge him in the Penglai treasure house, and said disdainfully, just a talented trash who can't walk on the emperor's path and can only choose the overbearing path. Gong Sun Shiyu didn't care so much. At this moment, his aura had reached the peak, and just like Zhuifeng not long ago, he had reached the point where he had to fight. He made a punch. In a fight between masters, only one move was needed. This was a strike that contained all of his techniques, cultivation base, comprehension, essence, energy, spirit, and everything, a strike that pressed forward with indomitable will. Instantly, Gong Sun Shiyu seemed to see the end of the cultivation method dilemma, as if he saw the hope to cross this dilemma. At this moment, under the influence of Gong Sun Shiyu's punch, those who had lost their souls, the tens of thousands of people who hadn't been pushed into the giant pit woke up one after another. But the moment they woke up, their consciousness was taken away again, and they fell to the ground. Gong Sun Shishui's face turned slightly pale, and he needed to launch a new battle soul to barely resist Gong Sun Shiyu's aura. But Mo Xiaofei still didn't move. He was like an insurmountable mountain, towering and motionless. I said I'll show mercy. Mo Xiaofei snorted coldly, but it's only one side. I've given you a chance, and now. I didn't break my promise. Break. He didn't seem to make any movements, only a single shout. But this shout was like a sharp sword that instantly cut through Gong Sun Shiyu's aura that had reached the peak, like piercing a balloon that had been forcefully inflated to the limit. The leaking of the aura instantly drained the blood, spirit in Gong Sun Shiyu's body. His fist had yet to truly strike out, but everything had already disappeared like flowing water. Just like how Windchaser was only a little bit away from comprehending the state of indomitable will, he was only a little bit away from being able to break through the predicament of the cultivation method and reach a whole new realm. Puff! Blood mist spurted out of Gong Sun Shiyu's mouth. At this moment, the meridians in his body couldn't withstand the violent backlash of his true force, and one acupoint after another exploded. Shiyu! Gong Sun Shishui screamed in shock. With blood in his mouth, Gong Sun Shiyu staggered and was about to fall. His hands drooped powerlessly, and he stared at Mo Xiaofei, unable to hide the horror in his eyes. Emperor realm. You. But at the same time, a violent aura suddenly appeared in Gong Sun Shiyu's consciousness. At this moment, he seemed to hear a huge dragon roar. A dragon roar filled with anger, craziness, and hatred rang out. In that instant, Gong Sun Shiyu's consciousness was almost taken away by another thought that was filled with killing intent. He suddenly stretched out his drooping arm, and the earth gave up the golden ripples. A golden sword shadow slowly stretched out from the earth at this moment. That golden sword shadow finally fell into Gong Sun Shiyu's hand, and his declining aura instantly recovered to the peak, or even higher, but it was just another kind of aura. Mo Xiaofei frowned. Xianyuan, I see. No wonder you're so arrogant. Go to hell. All of a sudden, Gong Sun Shiyu clenched the golden sword shadow in her hands. Like a sharp arrow, she shot out with great power and hacked down at Mo Xiaofei with this golden sword shadow, which was the simplest move, splitting Mount Hua. A crazy, murderous aura swept out. The moment Mo Xiaofei was about to be killed by the golden sword shadow, he suddenly raised his hand and made a gesture of holding the sword horizontally to block the attack. Ding! It was a sound like metal clashing. At this moment, the nearby mountains were all blasted apart by this loud sound, and they were all lowered by a lot. What a majestic momentum! What a terrifying impact! Zhou Feng had blood on the corner of his mouth. He pushed away the gravel that smashed on his body and slowly stood up. But immediately, he looked at Mo Xiaofei in shock. That golden sword shadow was now standing in front of Mo Xiaofei. Gong Sun Shiyu still maintained the posture of chopping down with all his strength, but something blocked the golden sword shadow. It was a flash of purple lightning that had blocked the golden sword shadow. It wasn't a purple lightning, but a sword that stirred up the purple lightning. It gradually became clear in Mo Xiaofei's hand. At this moment, Mo Xiaofei waved his hand, and the sword covered with purple lightning split the golden sword shadow in an instant. Gong Sun Shiyu's face changed dramatically, and the sudden change made his murderous mind recover a little. But the inertia of being split apart made him move his legs crazily. His legs dragged on the ground for dozens of meters before he finally stopped. There's actually a weapon in the world that can block the sharpness of Xuanyuan's sword. Gong Sun Shishui looked at this scene in disbelief. Although he knew that Gong Sun Shiyu could only summon a sword light of Xuanyuan's sword. But this was also the best weapon in Kelowna, the sharpest Xianyuan sword. What kind of sword is this? Gong Sun Shiyu's face had never been so solemn before. In Mo Xiaofei's sword covered with purple lightning, he even felt a power similar to Xuanyuan's. This almost overturned his understanding. This is Xianyuan, Sword of Emperor. Mo Xiaofei looked at Gong Sun Shiyu and said indifferently, Xianyuan, Sword of Emperor? Gong Sun Shiyu was stunned. How dare you use the name of Xianyuan? Impossible. Mo Xiaofei said coldly, Don't you know? It seems that your Gong Sun family has also declined. Since ancient times, Xianyuan has been divided into 3 swords. God slaying, heaven punishing, and Sword of Emperor. 3 swords combined into one is the real Xianyuan, Sword of Jiuzhou. This sword of yours is just a sword light of God slaying, a firefly's light. How dare it compete with the bright moon? I don't believe it. Gong Sun Shiyu's anger rose again. He raised the golden sword light in his hand again, and the sky was full of golden sword shadows. Mo Xiaofei snorted coldly. The god slaying has the world in his heart. He wants to kill the heartless god and leave a chance for the people to live. You only have selfish desires in your heart. You don't deserve it. As the owner of Xianyuan, you've really shamed me. Die. He raised the sword high and chopped it down resolutely. When the heavens were angry, the heavens were also angry. A purple thunderbolt broke through the layers of thick fog and heavily struck Gong Sun Shiyu's body with supreme majesty. The golden sword light shattered instantly. Heaven and earth turned dark. The tremendous power even directly exploded the crater, killing several black-robed men in an instant, not leaving behind a single trace of ash. After a long time, when everything calmed down, the sinkhole that swallowed tens of thousands of people had disappeared, and the surroundings were flat. However, The people who fainted on the ground were not hurt at all. Only Gongsun Shiyu, whose clothes were destroyed, his meridians exploded, and his body was covered in blood. He fell to the ground, his breathing weak, and his eyes lifeless. Gongsun Shishui was also not hurt by this terrifying blow. He looked at Imo Xiaofei, who was holding the sword of emperor in horror, and trembled with fear. He was afraid that the other party had such precise control of power, and trembled with the power of the sword of emperor. He had to bite the bullet, and came to Gongsun Shiyu's side. Looking at Gongsun Shiyu's hopeless appearance, he fell silent for a moment. "Take him away." Imo Xiaofei put down the sword of emperor and said indifferently, "I've destroyed his martial arts and cut off all his vitality. He won't live for long. For the sake of Xianyuan Palace's merit of guarding the world, I'll let him have a complete corpse." Gongsun Shishui was drenched in cold sweat, and his face was pale. Facing this mysterious young man, he couldn't even resist. Imo Xiaofei was too strong. When you go back, think about what the ancestral teachings of Xianyuan Palace are. Imo Xiaofei snorted coldly. "If I find that your Gongsun family dares to harm people again, I'll take the sword of emperor and kill my way to Xianyuan Palace to wipe out your family." Gongsun Shishui didn't speak, but silently picked up Gongsun Shiyu. After taking a deep look at Imo Xiaofei, he rushed out of this place without a word. Gongsun Shiyu's breath was getting weaker and weaker and was almost gone. "Big brother?" Zhuefeng dragged his tired body, slowly coming to Imo Xiaofei. His wounds healed quickly. After being sent flying by Gongsun Shiyu's punch, although he failed to comprehend the state of indomitable will, he accidentally activated a new ability in Greedy Wolf's inheritance: self-healing. Super self-healing ability. Imo Xiaofei waved his hand, and the sword of emperor disappeared from his hand. He turned his head and looked at Zhuefeng. He revealed a rare smile. People who learn martial arts must remember to be fickle and impatient. One failure doesn't mean anything. Comprehend what I've taught you in your own way. Big brother? Wind-chasing wolf was stunned. He felt that this big brother Imo Xiaofei was a bit off. "I'm a bit tired. I'll take a rest." Imo Xiaofei still looked calm, but there was a supreme majesty in the calmness. "I'll return your big brother to you." With that, Imo Xiaofei fell down. Zhuefeng hurriedly reached out to support him, only to find that Imo Xiaofei had fainted, but his breathing was smooth, as if he was just sleeping. But in a flash, Imo Xiaofei opened his eyes again. He called weakly, "Zhuefeng." This tone was already the familiar tone of Imo Xiaofei that Wind-chasing Wolf was familiar with. Wind-chasing Wolf said in surprise, "Big brother, you're normal." "Probably." Imo Xiaofei gave a bitter smile. Chapter 1125. It didn't take long for Imo Xiaofei to wake up again. Zhuefeng was naturally very happy. He was almost worried to death during this period of time. Now that Imo Xiaofei had recovered, he was naturally thankful. "Big brother, what happened to you? Do you remember why I came to Mount Tai?" Imo Xiaofei looked at Zhuefeng. Although he was trapped in his body during this period of time, it was not that he couldn't perceive what happened in the outside world. For Imo Xiaofei, this experience was very unreal. He was like a bystander, constantly looking at his body and what that person had experienced. Imo Xiaofei was sincerely grateful to Zhuefeng because during this period of time, Zhuefeng still didn't leave him and even replaced him to communicate with his distant parents. "Well, you said you want to find the successor of the cloth sect and find the mystery of your previous life," Zhuefeng said quickly. "Is my previous life?" Imo Xiaofei said faintly. Zhuefeng was stunned and widened his eyes. "Previous life? Isn't he the ferocious ghost who occupied your body?" As a demon, he still knew some common sense. The previous life was more often equivalent to another life, a memory, but Imo Xiaofei was obviously another person. "It's true." Imo Xiaofei shook his head and smiled bitterly. "Although I don't understand, but he is indeed my previous life, and his background is so big that I don't even dare to think about it." With that said, Mo Xiaofei slowly stood up and waved his hand. Not far away, a boulder weighing more than 1,000 kilograms flew out of the soil in an instant. Then it gently floated above Mo Xiaofei like a bird, nimbly circling around. Even Mo Xiaofei whispered, "That boss, when he gave me this infinite possibility, did he already know, boss?" Mo Xiaofei had encountered it. Zhuefeng had also encountered it. This was the common connection between the two. It was also a topic that he and Zhuefeng discussed privately, but would not casually discuss. Big brother. Zhuefeng took a deep breath, patted Mo Xiaofei's shoulder, and said seriously, "Whether it's the previous life or the present life, you're my big brother, and you'll be my big brother forever." We agreed on a lifetime. A year, a month, or even an hour is not considered a lifetime. Mo Xiaofei was moved, but he seemed to have heard this sentence somewhere before. Something doesn't seem right. What's with the sudden goosebumps? Mo Xiaofei shook his head hard. The mystery of the previous life was too important for Mo Xiaofei to deal with. Not to mention that he couldn't see the successor of the Linen sect. He seemed to be in some kind of danger again. How to deal with the tens of thousands of people who had fallen was a headache. Let's save them first. Mo Xiaofei took a deep breath. We can't ignore them, but there are so many people. Looking at Mo Xiaofei pinching his sleeves, wind-chasing wolf smiled. No matter how difficult it was, or whether he could save it or not, he would never hesitate to save it once he made up his mind. This was the big brother, Mo Xiaofei, he was familiar with. "Big brother, let me help you." Zhuefeng caught up from behind. "Wake up the policemen and those in military uniform first." Mo Xiaofei said quickly, "Don't tell them what happened, lest it causes panic. Just say that you don't know anything." "Oh, call the policemen and the soldiers." "Okay." Gongsun Shishui had to stop. Gongsun Shiyu, who was on his back, was dying. Just as the mysterious and powerful youngster said, Gongsun Shiyu's vitality had been cut off. His meridians were all broken, his bones were almost broken, and his chi was full of holes. With such injuries, even if he could be saved, Gongsun Shiyu would most likely become a complete cripple. "Hey!" Gongsun Shishui put down Gongsun Shiyu slowly, looking at his lifeless eyes, saying nothing. Gongsun Shiyu was still trying to say something. However, at this moment, it seemed that even moving his lips was difficult for him to ascend to the heavens. "Don't worry, I'll take you back to Xinyuan Palace." Gongsun Shishui looked very calm. He had always been calm. He had been following Gongsun Shiyu since he was a child, silently cooperating with Gongsun Shiyu. Gongsun Shiyu's eyes were wide open as he stared at Gongsun Shishui. The despair in his eyes was moving. Gongsun Shishui took a deep breath and suddenly pressed his palm on Gongsun Shiyu's chest. He said in a low voice, "Is this the end?" But at this moment, Gongsun Shishui suddenly frowned, because an extremely violent, evil and violent aura suddenly gushed out from Gongsun Shiyu's body. It was as red as blood, but it also looked like it was mixed with ink. A red and black sticky mist slowly spread out from Gongsun Shiyu's body. It completely covered Gongsun Shiyu. Gongsun Shishui was shocked. At this moment, Gongsun Shiyu slowly stood up. His entire body was wrapped in a thick red and black fog. His mouth suddenly cracked open all the way to his ears. His eyes also cracked open at the same time. On his forehead, there was a giant inverted vertical eye that didn't look like a human's. Gongsun Shishui instantly assumed a vigilant posture. This Gongsun Shiyu in front of him tilted his head, looking at Gongsun Shishui with a strange posture. "Shishui, what are you doing?" This was not only Gongsun Shiyu's voice. There seemed to be another sharp voice mixed in with his voice. "You are not Shiyu, what are you?" "Me?" Gongsun Shiyu opened his bloody mouth, grinning viciously. "I am Gongsun Shiyu. Gongsun Shiyu is me." "Shishui, don't you recognize me?" Gongsun Shishui did not hesitate, quickly sending a palm strike towards Gongsun Shiyu. However, he did not expect that Gongsun Shiyu had another terrifying power erupting from his body. With a wave of his hand, he sent Gongsun Shishui flying backwards, heavily injured and spitting out blood. Gongsun Shiyu's meridians were all broken, and his life force was gone. He could not have this kind of power. Gongsun Shishui frowned, thinking for a moment. Without hesitation, he turned around and dashed away. But at this moment, Gongsun Shiyu reached out and grabbed Gongsun Shishui. "You seem to have something good on you, Shishui. Shouldn't you give it to me? I am your master." Gongsun Shiyu slapped Gongsun Shishui's chest. He was knocked to the ground again, and this time, Gongsun Shiyu had a blood-red bead in his palm. Gongsun Shiyu held the bead between his fingers, looking at it and laughing strangely. "Soul-generating bead. You took it away during the chaos, right? What do you want to do with it?" "What are you?" Gongsun Shishui shouted angrily. But Gongsun Shiyu directly swallowed the bead. In an instant, the thick aura around Gongsun Shiyu became even thicker, and a huge amount of life force erupted from his body. The surging life force, along with the thick aura, rushed into Gongsun Shiyu's body. Not long after, Gongsun Shiyu appeared in front of Gongsun Shishui, his face full of evil. "Soul-generating bead is a good thing." The evil Gongsun Shiyu chuckled. "Then 1,000,000 soul-generating beads. I want them too." At this moment, Gongsun Shishui suddenly waved his palm, chopping towards Gongsun Shiyu's leg. "Humph!" But Gongsun Shiyu snorted coldly, his hand forming a sword finger, and swept it. A dark red sword light flashed, and Gongsun Shishui's left arm was cut off. Gongsun Shishui screamed miserably, the veins on his face bulging, and he clutched the place where his arm was cut off. "If you don't want to die, then be my lackey." Gongsun Shiyu sneered. "The people of Xianyuan Palace's Gongsun clan are stronger than ants." He strode into the thick fog and didn't look back. "Trash, follow me." At this moment, Gongsun Shishui was drenched in cold sweat, and his heart was in turmoil. But as if there was an irresistible will, he stood up, trembling, and followed the other party's footsteps while enduring the pain. In front of him, the evil Gongsun Shiyu seemed to be muttering to himself, "It's time to settle the debt of the past." "Shinryu," I crawled back from the underworld. After a while, the long shura needed to stop. It consumed a lot of energy to continuously bleed and create a body. In the thick fog, the young long shura sat cross-legged on the edge of a stream. But at this moment, her heart palpitated inexplicably. With a surprised expression, she opened her eyes instantly and looked up at a certain direction. From that place, there was an enormous, majestic, and domineering aura that could look down on the world soaring into the sky. "Emperor's sword?" She stood up abruptly with an inconceivable expression. "Emperor's sword. How could it appear at this moment? It shouldn't be." "Oh no, the Emperor's sword is out." Zijuan, Long Shura, shook her head, holding the bead in her hands. The body created instantly wrapped around her, and then she turned into a golden light and flew away. After the battle in the giant pit, Long Shura, who was infuriated by the madness of the Kelowna realm of Taoists and monsters, left. Su Zijuan took Jessica back to the villa that was one of the products of Xianyuan Palace. The old dirty turtle Chichikamaya and Ghost Baby had already arrived. Chichikamaya was busy decocting medicine to replenish blood for Long Shura. At the same time, he was also busy treating the little butterfly monster Luo Dance, who was released from the Wangui Pagoda, and the last patient, Xiao Xingma, the governor of Ghost City. After checking that Luo Dance's condition had stabilized, Su Zijuan directly bit her wrist and let Luo Dance drink a few drops of blood. The little butterfly monster's breath gradually became better, but it would take some time for her to wake up. Xiao Xingma didn't have such a good treatment. He could only rely on absorbing the ghost energy in the Wangui Pagoda to heal himself. Although it was still foggy outside, there was a rare sense of safety in the villa. At least Jessica thought so. Under the continuous fatigue, she also had a rare rest. But this time, the sound of something breaking suddenly came from the room where Su Zijuan was resting. Jessica was stunned. She quickly ran to the next room and broke into the door. Then she was shocked. "Master!" Su Zijuan hugged her body, trembling and kneeling on the ground. Her fangs seemed to be out of control. Her eyes turned blood red. Her face was pale and twisted with pain. She seemed to be suffering from extreme pain. Master, Jessica walked to Su Zijuan with concern. Unexpectedly, Su Zijuan went crazy at this time. She hit Jessica's chest with her palm. This foreign beauty's towering breasts were slapped down. Jessica spat out a mouthful of blood. Then she broke through the door and flew back to the back room. If she hadn't reached the inhuman stage, she would have been killed by this palm. But now she was seriously injured and couldn't get up. Princess, elder sister, Chichi Kamaya, and Ghost Baby came after hearing the sound. Seeing Su Zijuan's crazy appearance, they were both shocked. However, before they could react, Su Zijuan went berserk once again. Her majestic, demonic energy instantly blew up the entire mansion. "Leave me alone. Take her away." In madness, Su Zijuan shouted with all her strength. Chichi Kamaya and Ghost Baby were shocked. But at this time, a golden light came from the thick fog in the sky. A huge dragon shadow hovered above the villa. It's Lord Long. In the sky, Long Shua didn't care about Chichi Kamaya and Ghost Baby. She turned into a golden light and shot down. In the golden light, the body created by the explosion of power pressed on Su Zijuan's forehead. It seemed to ease the madness of Su Zijuan. Old woman, you, stupid girl. I told you not to let you become a drought demon, but you didn't listen. Now you're in trouble." Long Shua's voice was anxious and scared. "Do you think it's so easy to suppress the god-slaying sword? Don't talk. Use all your strength to suppress the agitation of the god-slaying sword in your body. I can't hold on for long." Su Zijuan gritted her teeth. But after listening to Long Shua's words, she closed her eyes. At this time, Kelowna and Shinryu used all their strength. Su Zijuan's violent demonic power also calmed down little by little. Her demonic appearance also gradually returned to normal. The creation chi could only last for 5 minutes at most, and the strength of Long Shua's outburst would reduce this time. At this time, the creation body had almost exhausted the upper limit of the power that it could reach. However, the creation body couldn't continue for more than a minute and could only withdraw. But now Su Zijuan could rely on her own strength to calm the chaos in her body. Long Shua was relieved and returned to the appearance of a child. She subconsciously glanced at Chichi Kamaya's secret treasure. She didn't know when a crack appeared on the pearl. At this moment, Chichi Kamaya, who hurried forward, seemed to have noticed the situation of the pearl. After all, this turtle pearl appeared with his birth. Long Shua looked at Chichi Kamaya and shook her head imperceptibly. Chichi Kamaya could only sigh. Then he came to Su Zijuan and asked with concern, "How is the princess?" When the emperor's sword appeared, the killing god in her body resonated and went out of control. Long Shua shook her head, but the emperor's sword only appeared for a moment and then stopped breathing. She should be fine in a short time. Emperor's sword. Chichi Kamaya was shocked. Wasn't this emperor's sword lost with the Great Qin Empire? Why did it suddenly appear after 2,000 years? "How do I know?" Long Shua said impatiently. "I'm just Long Shua, not the almighty dragon. Don't ask me everything." Chichi Kamaya sighed. After a moment of silence, he turned back and looked at Ghost Baby. "Ghost Baby, take Miss Jessica for treatment. Leave this place to me and Lord Long. Also, tell Castellan Shao that everything is fine for now." In other words, he didn't want anyone to disturb them. Although Ghost Baby was reluctant, he still helped Jessica up and walked into the part of the villa that was still intact. Long Shua had returned to the appearance of a child, but she was still watching Su Zijuan closely. She held the turtle pearl tightly in her hand. "You shouldn't have let her be born," Long Shua said faintly. Chichi Kamaya kept silent. He turned his head and said in a low voice, "Princess, you become the Shinryu and got rid of Xuanyuan's destiny. But now you've fallen into another destiny. But for Xianyuan Palace, the inheritance of the human sovereign can't be cut off." Chapter 1126. This place was empty, and it was quiet all around. With the thick fog, They could even see the chaos caused by people leaving in a hurry. Probably for the timid, going deep into this place would be very challenging for the nerves. Of course, this was only for ordinary people. Obviously, the people walking here at this moment were not ordinary people, Gong Sunhua and Gong Fanqing. Fortunately, there are not many changes around here. Gong Sunhua looked around and sighed. I didn't expect that 500 years have passed. I remember that there used to be a big tree here. Gong Fanqing rolled her eyes at this guy. Now is not the time for you to be sad. The aura of the Supreme One is faintly discernible. Why did it weaken so much in the past hundreds of years? Here we are. Gong Sunhua frowned, but suddenly stopped and looked up. In the thick fog, there was an ancient mansion. The two words Song Mansion were written on the doorplate of the mansion. It was the ancestral mansion of the Song family. The two broke the door and walked all the way to an ancient well in the abandoned backyard of the Song family's ancestral mansion. Before going into the ancient well, Gong Sunhua frowned. Someone should have lived here for a while not long ago. The house should have been renovated. Gong Fanqing said quickly. Maybe the descendant of the Supreme One came back. But looking at the thick fog, he should have taken refuge. Gong Sunhua nodded, and then jumped into the ancient well first, followed by Gong Fanqing. The two soon landed at the bottom of the ancient well. The two lit up the mechanism in the ancient well, illuminating the surroundings, and walked through the ancient well with great familiarity. As they walked through the huge building at the bottom of the ancient well, the two had a dignified look on their faces. Because they had found traces of activity in the building at the bottom of the ancient well, it was reasonable to say that someone had been in the ancestral mansion of the Song family, and it was the descendant of the Song family. But it was very strange that there were traces of activity at the bottom of the ancient well. Of course, 500 years had passed. Although anything could happen, it was still possible. However, the traces of activity at the bottom of the ancient well were clearly recent. In fact, the two of them determined that it happened at the same time as the Song family's ancestral mansion. Did the descendants of the Song family discover the secret in the ancient well? But it didn't seem to be so. This was because there were no traces of human intrusion in the deepest part of the ancient well. What's going on? Why is the spiritual energy in the earth vein so weak? Gong Fanqing finally noticed something amiss. At this time, the two of them had already entered the deepest part of the tomb, which was also the most important place, the tomb chamber where a stone coffin was located. I'm afraid it has been broken for many years. Gong Sunhua frowned. No wonder your honor's aura is so weak. With that, Gong Sunhua took a deep breath and walked to the front of the sarcophagus with a solemn expression. He lifted the lid of the sarcophagus with both hands. Inside the sarcophagus was a middle-aged man in a yellow robe. His face was haggard, and a strong death qi surged out as the lid of the sarcophagus was lifted. Gong Fanqing and Gong Sunhua were both God's favored sons who had once stirred up a storm in the world. Their cultivation was also outstanding, so the invasion of the death qi didn't cause much trouble for them. Your honor's divine soul is too weak. It's almost dried up. Gong Fanqing was shocked at this time. You and I, one for each of us, replenish some of your honor's soul power first. Otherwise, your honor's remaining spiritual consciousness may not be preserved. Gong Sunhua also realized the seriousness of the matter, so without saying anything, he lifted the arm of the man in the yellow robe in the sarcophagus, palm to palm, and began to transfer his soul power. Humans had 3 spiritual souls and 7 physical souls. If a person lost any of the spiritual souls or physical souls, he or she would have the symptoms of losing one's soul. If it was a light case, he or she would become a muddle-headed person, and if it was a serious case, he or she would fall into a coma. If it wasn't for his or her cultivation, no one dared to use his or her soul power. Gong Fanqing did the same at this time. She used her palm to block the other palm of the man in the yellow robe. Not long after, wisps of white smoke slowly emerged from the foreheads of the two people. Both of them were sweating profusely, but their faces were red. This transfer took half a day. Until they were exhausted, they had no choice but to let go of the man in the yellow robe's hand. Both of them didn't look good at this time, which showed that they had just recovered from a serious illness. On the other hand, the man in the yellow robe in the sarcophagus looked ruddy, as if he was a few years younger. At this time, he slowly opened his eyes. Seeing that the man in the yellow robe woke up, Gong Fanqing and Gong Sunhua walked to the bottom of the sarcophagus and knelt down. "Welcome back, Your Honor." Their voices were not loud, but the man in the yellow robe heard it very clearly. But he just woke up, and his eyes were very unfocused. After waking up, he looked down at the thing in his hand. It was a piece of jade rui. After a long time, he slowly opened his mouth and said in a hoarse voice, "How long have I slept?" Gong Sunhua and Gong Fanqing looked at each other. Gong Sunhua quickly said, "Your Honor, since Fanqing and I entered Penglai, 500 years have passed in the outside world. But today, it seems that there is no longer a dynasty, but a new collective power called the government." 500 years. The man in the yellow robe frowned. This time seemed to be out of his expectation. He seemed to be trying hard to recall something. "It seems that someone came and said something to me. Something like that. Your Honor, before Wua and I entered your chamber, we saw traces of people moving in the mansion above. It is very likely that your descendants have come back." The man in the yellow robe nodded and turned his head to look at a memorial tablet in front of the tomb with Song Chonging written on it. "Yes, my dynasty has been protected by one of the 12 ancestral dragon veins of Kelowna. It has been a royal family for thousands of years, and its bloodline has never stopped. Your Honor, when Fanqing and I left, the big array here was still working normally. It is reasonable to say that under the effect of the big array, the aura of Mount Tai should be continuously used to nourish Your Honor's divine soul." "Why? Why is Your Honor's divine soul weakened to such an extent? If Fanqing and I didn't come in time, Your Honor's divine soul would have been." "I don't know." The man in the yellow robe shook his head. Suddenly, the aura of Mount Tai was cut off. "I could only rely on sleeping to reduce the consumption of my soul power. The other party just cut off my soul power, which meant that I was left to fend for myself. Why did you two come back after 500 years? "Your Honor, you don't know." Gong Sunhua said quickly, "That year, when Your Honor gave us the key, Fanqing and I were able to enter Penglai. We didn't expect that this operation would be known by a sword practitioner. His name is Tai Bai, and people call him Green Lotus Sword Immortal. He is a peerless genius in the Tao querying state, but he has the attack power of the Tao fruit state. Tai Bai and I entered Penglai together, but we didn't expect that there had been a big change in Penglai. Fanqing and I were trapped in Penglai for several years, and we were able to get out earlier. However, we were already in heaven and earth. The flow of time in Penglai is different from the outside world." The man in the yellow robe listened silently, as if he was trying to distinguish the truth in Gong Sunhua's words. After a long time, he slowly said, "Now, what about Tai Bai?" Tai Bai disappeared after making a big scene in Penglai. No one knows whether he is alive or dead. Gong Fanqing then briefly told him what happened after they met Jiangzhou. "That year, I had no choice but to struggle with my last breath here. After that, I gave you two the key of Penglai, which have been passed down since ancient times, in order to let you go to Penglai and get the method of rebirth from the immortal of Penglai." The man in the yellow robe sighed slowly. "It seems that the matter of reversing yin and yang and coming back from the dead is really very difficult. Is this fate?" After saying this, the man in the yellow robe coughed softly, and his expression was quite painful. He was only supporting his body with his spirit, but this body had been cut off long ago. It was just a bag of skin. It had been withering all the time. "Your Honor." Gong Sunhua and Fanqing hurried forward. The man in the yellow robe waved his hand and said in a low voice, "It's too late to find another place to nourish my spirit. The only thing we can do now is to ask my descendants to fulfill their filial piety. I need fresh flesh and blood of the Zhao family's bloodline." But outside, under the influence of the Four Seasons glazed book, the sky is covered with thick fog. The area within hundreds of miles is like a dead land. Kelowna and the Taoist and Monster Realm seem to be planning something important. There is even the shadow of Xianyuan Palace in it. Gong Fanqing had to remind him, and this time There's a strange change in the Penglai treasure house. There's a sea of people. We really don't know whether your descendants are alive or dead. It's okay. The man in the yellow robe shook his head. Since they are my descendants, I can feel it. Let's go east. I can feel that they're not far away. Gong Sanhua and Gong Fanqing nodded. Then, let's not waste any time. Let's act now. They couldn't let the man in the yellow robe die, because once he died, they would lose their own souls. Their spirits were bound. Once the spirit of the man in the yellow robe was destroyed, their own spirits would be destroyed as well. Saving him was equivalent to saving themselves. Walking in the thick fog, Song Howren suddenly stopped and looked in a certain direction thoughtfully. This action of stopping caused the bodyguards of the Song family behind him to nervously grip the weapons in their hands, fully focused on sensing everything around them. Their bodies were all implanted with a peculiar power called true power. This kind of true power would automatically activate a special ability called heaven vision and earth hearing, which greatly enhanced their perception and allowed them to see things in the fog within a certain range. It felt as if they were wearing night vision goggles. Of course, if the electronic devices in the fog didn't malfunction, they probably wouldn't need this so-called heaven vision and earth hearing technique. This was the true power that Princess Chuyang injected into them. Song Howren couldn't do this yet. This was the technique that Princess Chuyang said the Great Qin Empire's cavalry used to kill the strange beasts outside the Great Wall. This technique couldn't be maintained forever. When the true power in everyone's body was used up, it would automatically disappear. The next time they wanted to use it, they had to inject more true power. Well, it was almost like using Princess Chuyang as a power bank. This was what Song Howren thought at that time. After obtaining the technique to walk in the fog, he quickly left some people to protect his father and Song Ying while he led the rest into the fog to look for the other warriors of the Song family who were lost. What's going on? Seeing that Song Howren was acting a little strange, Princess Chuyang frowned. She was still 3 meters away from Song Howren. Now, Song Howren's control over the distance was far better than before. This distance of 3 meters had never been increased or decreased by an inch. This made Princess New Dawn rather dissatisfied, but she didn't show it. Nothing. I just suddenly had a strange feeling. Song Howren shook his head and said, I can't describe it, but I feel that it's not something good. When one cultivates martial arts or Tao to a certain extent, one will occasionally have a sudden impulse. Princess Chuyang said indifferently, perhaps it's related to oneself, or perhaps it's related to one's family. Song Howren frowned and said, Princess, you mean my father and Song Ying will be in danger? Princess Chuyang said expressionlessly, perhaps you will be in danger. This fog is strange to begin with. Song Howren shrugged. However, he still gave the order to have the two of them return to the hotel where his father and Song Ying were staying for the time being. He would wait in the same place. They hadn't been out for a long time, only about an hour. It wouldn't take long for them to go and come back. At this moment, Song Howren looked at Princess Chuyang, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, seemingly concentrating. He suddenly smiled and said, Princess, you said that only when one's martial arts reach a certain level will they have a sudden impulse. Does that mean that my martial arts have also reached a certain level? Princess Chuyang looked indifferently at Song Howren. In the past, even the cavalry captain with the lowest level of martial arts in the Great Qin Empire had a higher level of martial arts than you. They have been cultivating for tens of years without stopping. How could they be compared to you, who only cultivated for 1 or 2 days? You are simply too stupid. But who was young Master Song? That shameless skill was simply hundreds or thousands of times more powerful than the cultivation of the Babel floating diagram in her body. Young Master Song squinted his eyes and smiled. Your Highness, has anyone ever told you that your cold appearance is very sexy? Lecture. Princess Chuyang snorted coldly. This man was not only a scoundrel, he was even shameless. How could there be such a person in the world? And he even had the appearance of an emperor. The heavens were simply blind. I am speaking the truth. Song Howren smiled faintly and said, this cold sexiness, even I am a bit moved. I am so moved that I want to introduce you to Luochio. Yeah, it seems like I can really consider it. I keep feeling that with his personality, he can also get along well with you. Luochio. Princess Chuyong frowned. When she had just woken up, she didn't seem to care about the things around her, but she remembered them all in her heart. She had vaguely heard this name a few times in the Song family. It seemed that this was a person that the entire Song family cared about very much. He is a person who will very quietly listen to my stories. Song Howren's face was full of smiles at this time. He is really very likable. Aya, it is a pity that I am a man. Princess Chuyong. Her Highness looked up and down at Song Howren with a strange gaze. Then she frowned and said rather seriously, "The seclusion of Longyang has existed since ancient times. I didn't think that you would actually—" Song Howren laughed loudly and said, "If a man is gentler than a woman, naturally there would be nothing for you women to do, right?" Her Highness suddenly felt a chill.